And with that, I have the privilege to turn the call over to Mary.
All right. Hello, everybody. And thanks for joining us for this space where we're going to discuss Tesla, everything that's happening in autonomy, and the shocking announcement yesterday by General Motors to shut down Cruise and fold it into GM. So, man, what a day. What is going on? Is it 2021? Tesla crossed the prophesized 420.69 level today, which was our previous price target from 2 weeks ago. Holmars Capital is now raising our price target to 69 4 and 20 cents. And I think this is really just the beginning. So first, I just want to say on the recent price action, this is something that has been a long time coming. In 2021, the last time we were at these levels, FSD was a joke. Now it's doing entire drives entirely on its own from start to finish. We've seen our first driverless rides. We've seen 4680 in thousands of Cybertrucks. We've seen next generation vehicles like the Cybercab. We've seen millions of Model 3 and Y sold since that last all time high. So the company is completely transformed. We've seen new programs like Optimus, but it's taken the stock a little while to catch up. And everybody gets excited to see the market move, but this value wasn't created today. It wasn't created in the last week. It wasn't created in the last month. This is years of hard work over, from 2021 to now that has allowed Tesla to grow into and exceed this valuation. And I just hope that people can stay centered. The last time we had a crazy run up like this in 2021, it was a lot of fun, but it ended up being, in many ways, a poison that fractured the community. A lot of people that loved and supported Tesla ended up hating it and turning on Elon and saying, this is the worst guy in the world because they made some dumb trade and they blamed Tesla for it. One of the most important companies of our time. There's a lot of stocks out there that I've made money on. I made a lot of money on Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft. But I'm not out here doing spaces about the H100 or the latest version of Microsoft Word. Those companies are great businesses, but they don't excite people. They don't focus people's attention like Tesla does. I mean, Tesla's really building products that change your life and change the world. The kind of products Apple used to build. So I think this is really just the beginning for this company. There will be highs and lows, but I hope that we can find investors who really are not just addicted to making money, who are not going to run as soon as things get tough. We're going to hold this company, who are going to vote on what's best for this company and continue to guide it all the way to, multi-trillion dollar market caps and above. And, there's many tough times coming. Changing the world to, replace manually driven gas transport to autonomous electric transport, we are not even 1% of the way there yet. We haven't even started. Okay. So this is really day one for Tesla. And before we get into the meat of the call or the meat of the space that we've sort of come here to discuss, I just have to mention Elon and his comp package. We really need to get this guy his comp package. He's making all of us rich, but this judge has put his comp package in jeopardy. And, it's really, I think, his leadership that's brought people together, brought engineers who could be working on any other company, probably producing nothing, but bringing those engineers together, focusing them, and getting them to work on something that's really moved the state of the art forward in a big way. And I think it's important for us to be able to compensate our executive, especially when he's got so many people vying for his attention. You know, SpaceX now a $350 billion company in itself. The federal government now tapping him to fix the federal government. And we need to make sure that he's incentivized to work for us, the Tesla shareholders. And that, I mean, we voted for this multiple times, but it's not just about Elon. If this sort of incentive structure is not allowed or is not legal, really that creates far less opportunities in capital markets. We've seen the wealth creation it's driven in Tesla. There should be no doubt in people's mind that this type of incentive based structure, even though it can kind of seem crazy on paper, is very beneficial to shareholders. And this $2 billion options grant we gave him, it only seems to be a crazy high figure, really, because of how much the stock is appreciated and how much money he's made for everybody else. So I hope that whatever needs to be done, we can continue to make sure that, look, this guy made a lot of money for a lot of us. His teams have made a lot of money for us. Some cases, I've seen people who have been investing since the thing was at $4, right? So we're talking about 100x plus return for some people. And all they really had to do was hold. And that's changed the lives of ordinary production workers, employees, ordinary retail investors. So it just strikes me as fundamentally wrong that he was able to deliver on so much of what everyone said was impossible. They said, "You're crazy. You can't start a car company. You're even crazier if you start an electric one." They said, "Oh, you can't do autonomy with pure vision. It's never going to work. You need LiDAR." And ADAS is a completely different thing than autonomy. And every single one of those naysayers was wrong. And this is really culminating yesterday. I think it's no coincidence that you see this announcement by GM that they're shutting down Cruise the day before Tesla hits its all-time high, exceeding 420.69. What General Motors did yesterday was come out and say, you know what? Tesla's actually right. Elon Musk has had the right vision of this since the beginning. And it was a pretty stunning and awkward call, honestly. It was a little bit of a shit show. You could see the analysts were just kind of like, "Excuse me? What? You're shutting down Cruise and folding it into GM?" And they basically said, "Look, we're just wasting way too much money on this thing. It's a disaster. They already pulled our permit. We've invested $10 billion in this thing. How much money are we going to throw at them? And they're going to fold it into GM. Cruise, a San Francisco Y Combinator backed tech startup, and General Motors, a centuries old legacy automaker mired in bureaucracy. Yeah, that's going to go well. Just fold them together. That's going to go really well." And if you had any doubt about this sort of cultural clash, I think Kyle Vogt, the founder and former CEO of Cruise's tweet, said it all. He said, "In case anyone had any doubt, I think today proves GM are a bunch of dummies." Right? So quite the ringing endorsement there from the former CEO of Cruise. And, you just think about it and he's right. You know, these Cruise vehicles were outfitted with tons of sensors. They cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. How is that going to work for a solution that gets integrated into the vehicle? It's not. You're going to need dramatic changes. You're really probably going to have to move to a pure vision approach, which is kind of what they're talking about. They said, "Oh, yeah, we're going to do an end to end foundation model like Tesla." And I think that's actually the right approach. But I mean, who's going to buy an Escalade with a bunch of LiDAR sticking out on the roof like Cruise had, right? So the plan is really a head scratcher. And they say of the $2 billion a year we're wasting on Cruise, first of all, You already shut down the service. You're still losing 2 billion a year. That's kind of impressive, in a bad way. But they say, okay, we can cut that to just 1 billion if we shut down Cruise. So I'm going to play some clips from the call, and if you have any questions or comments on what Mary Barr is saying here, just hit the request to speak button or raise your hand. So this was the opening.
And with that, I have the privilege to turn the call over to Mary.
Hey, thanks, Ashish, and good afternoon, everyone. Earlier today, we announced plans to realign our autonomous driving strategy to prioritize the development of advanced driver assistance technology and a path to fully autonomous personal vehicles.
So fully autonomous personal vehicles. They say they're shutting down Cruise to focus on personal autonomous vehicles. In other words, they looked at FSD 13. They probably looked at one of my videos for all I know and said, wait a minute, this is going to kill us. Who cares if we have a robo taxi in Austin, Texas, if I can't buy anything like this on a GM car that's for sale? Meanwhile, I can go lease a Tesla for $299 a month, and the thing can literally, you push a button on the screen, it reverses out of the spot, takes you to your destination and parks, and you get out of the car. I mean, Tesla's already selling personal autonomous vehicles. And I've been banging the table on this for a while. I've been saying this is what consumers really want. Nobody's making $1 in robotaxi. The market that is there today that you can actually make money on is an autonomous system that runs in your car. And that's been what Tesla's working on for years. GM is now saying, "Hey, wait a minute. This is actually the right path forward." All electric?
Hey Omar, it's Will. Hey, I definitely think the oh crap moment for them was probably when you put FSD on and it backed up around the UPS truck. That was almost parallel with where your car was, into reverse several feet, and then went around it. That was probably the oh wait, this is not going to go well for us moment that the Cruise team and GM had.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the bottom line is, which you can see the whole industry acknowledging, including GM, is that there have been fundamental advancements in AI. Obviously, the build out of massive levels of training compute at a scale that we've never seen before, these NVIDIA chips that keep getting faster and faster with each new generation, that's been a big unlock for sure in allowing us to pursue new methods like sort of, what LLMs are doing and the sort of new end-to-end FSD. In addition, to the new end-to-end approach, which has been a breakthrough this year, both 11 and 12 and 13 FSD released this year, generative AI has also been extremely helpful. So Tesla's ability to utilize generative AI to, for example, generate variations of the same scene in the training data synthetically. So they say, okay, here's an example where there was a pedestrian crossing illegally and we were in the right lane. Can you simulate what the exact same thing would look like from the left lane? And using generative approaches to do that. Even these sort of vision based LLMs, if you think about sort of the labeling task, right? When you want to train a model, you want to find the examples to show it. Being able to pass that to a vision LLM and ask it questions to be able to sort of curate your training data set, that's a big unlock. So essentially, generative AI has changed the game in autonomy. A lot of the things that people have been struggling with for years, um, we now know how to do. And yeah, this is, I think, partially GM reacting to that. Paul?
Yeah, I was going to say too is I rented a GM truck for about 2 weeks because my car, unfortunately, is getting the battery changed out, the high voltage, my Model X. And the thing that I noticed is that the car feels like a 1990 car, and there's no difference in these new cars that GM and Toyota and everyone's putting out. The only thing that's different is the interface. They're adding new interfaces to make them slightly larger, but they're not like a 2017 Model 3 that smokes everything on the market. And I take my daughter's 2019 Model 3, and people drive it and say, "Wow, can I get this same technology on any other car? I'm like, no, it doesn't exist yet. And that's really hurting everyone, including GM. I think that's probably what they're trying to do, is try to catch up now. But Monroe said back in 2017 that Tesla has a product that no one on the market has, and they're 10 years behind at best. So they're doing well to try to catch up now, but it's kind of too late. But at least they're finally getting into the game, and it will add to safety.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the iPhone, where, the iPhone came onto the market and they called it a phone, but it wasn't really a phone at all. It was a computer you could put in your pocket. So you saw all other phone makers basically die. And it was really because the iPhone was a misnomer. It was replacing your phone, but it really ended up replacing so many other things: your camera, your flashlight, you name it. And you're kind of seeing the same thing here with Tesla. GM's building cars and Tesla's building robots. GM takes an engine and buys a bunch of parts from a bunch of suppliers, and they bolt them on together. They have a bunch of different configurations, this one with that stereo, this one with this hardware. Tesla's vertically integrating and designing their vehicles from top to bottom to run things like autonomy. And there is essentially going to be, no market for a classical car, a manually driven gas car in the future. And while it looks similar to the consumer, hey, this is a car, this is a car, the way they build it, from the casting to the vertical integration, the software updates across the car, is dramatically different. I mean, teaching Detroit how to develop their cars in a software oriented way is, like teaching your accountant how to tap dance. It's just a completely different area. JC?
I think so, Mo. Well, first of all, I was going to say two things. Now I'll say three. As a retired accountant, I will not be tap dancing. That's out of the question. Any sort of dancing. But the second thing I was going to say is, as a Tesla shareholder, yes, I would like to personally and publicly thank the UPS company. I believe that they are instrumental. Obviously, I'm being tongue in cheek. Yeah, your videos, the videos that have come out here lately, but especially that one with the UPS truck. I mean, it's got to be as clear as day to folks out there who maybe aren't as inundated with all of this as we are. That this is the way, and it's showing up in the share price, right? And the final thing I was going to say, Omar, and probably the most important is, and this is the one that's, yeah, it's definitely the most important to me, is, I can remember being in a subscriber space just like this one in April of 2024, and the sentiment could not have been any different than how we feel today. And I wish to hell there was a recording of everything you said to all of us that day, but spaces suck so bad that I'm pretty sure there's not. But it was a master class in everything you just said about the value of this company, what the mission of this company is, to steady yourself. And I think we're going to have hard time. It's not like we're just going to go up and to the right forever. That's just not the way it works. We're on a great trajectory, but it's subscriber. It's times like today that, yeah, I'm euphoric and I'm really, really happy as a Tesla shareholder, but it also takes me back to April and that 9 o'clock at night, and we're all on a subscriber space, and the stock price is at 140, and everybody's going crazy and selling their shares, and oh my god, our CEO's a whack job, and my god, he likes this dude that has orange spray tan, and all of that stuff. And I'm just gonna say, I'll just say it. I mean, you held it. You held a lot of people together that day, Omar. A lot of folks. I think I went on some unhinged story about Ulysses S. Grant or something. You probably take that part out, but that that's what I'm reminded of today, is that. And so everybody that is a subscriber in this space, let me just confirm for you, Omar in April of 2024 said the exact same stuff he is saying right now. So it's not always going to be up and to the right, but we have a clear mission. Today, a bunch of folks, a bunch of eggheads on Wall Street with 80,000 column spreadsheets are starting to agree with us. But, you know, this guy
Yeah.
right here, the guy to the top and to the left, that's who you want to listen to. Don't listen to a bunch of egghead analysts over there in Madison Avenue or wherever. All right, I'm going to stop. I'll shut up.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Tesla, drama is guaranteed. Okay. Drama is always guaranteed. So I think I interviewed Elon in 2020 about Tesla at one of the houses he owned at the time. It was Willy Wonka's house, Gene Wilder's house. And he said, I think Tesla's going to have a bright future. There'll probably be a lot of disasters and drama along the way, but I think it'll work out. And that's proved to be very true. There have certainly been a lot of disasters and drama along the way, but things have worked out. And I think if they continue on the path that they're going, this is just the beginning. I mean, we're trading at what? A market cap under $1.5 billion today. I think the market opportunity for unsupervised rideshare globally, as it's fully deployed around the globe, could be anywhere from $5 trillion or more. Then you really look at Optimus. You look at not just automating driving, but what if you could automate everything? What if you could call a plumber to come fix your toilet? Someone clogged the whole thing up. There's shit flying everywhere. You don't want any human to see it. And a cyber cab just pulls up with a couple of Optimus. They walk out with a big plunger, fix your toilet, and they're out of there. And you just pay them hourly. That's kind of the sci-fi future that they're building. So this kind of reminds me of, Apple in the 1980s or something. People then couldn't really wrap their heads around what a big deal computers were going to be. Certainly, things weren't always great for Apple, right? Windows was killing them for a long time before they started to get into things like the iPod and the iPhone that really leveraged their strengths. But this is really going to be a product that can automate anything. We're starting with driving, but they're not stopping there. Paul?
Yeah, that robot pulling up to fix my toilet was a solid reference. I like that. But thank you, Omar. I just want to say that I just subscribed to your channel. Anyone else listening to, please do help support Omar's videos. I know it's not much, but I just want to kind of ask for that. And I like the fact that Omar doesn't ask for it, but I'm sure it helps. So um, keep doing what you're doing. And I think there are multiple companies that are in Tesla that we see. We got the power generation company, the robot company, the car company, AI. There's just so many different things that are not evaluated. The market, as we know, keeps evaluating this company as a car company, and it's a technology company. And I think it is bigger than Apple, and we're just waiting for the market to catch up.
Yeah, so, a lot of people think when you buy a company, you're buying the business. So if a company's selling Kleenex, you're buying the Kleenex. And for a lot of business, that's true. You're buying the Kleenex factory, you're making money selling Kleenex. But really, when you buy a company, you're buying the team, you're buying the people as well. You're buying a piece of really Elon Musk himself. So when you try and calculate for a fast growing, incredibly innovative tech company, what's going to be the future cash flows of the company, there's always that X factor. The last time we reached an all time high in November of 2021, Elon had probably barely started thinking about Optimus, right? Now it's a lot of people think probably the majority of the future value of the company, assuming everything works out. So, what else are they going to think of as they generate cash flow from endeavors like Robotaxi and Optimus? What else are they going to build? We don't even know, but you just look at the level of innovation compared to Apple. You look at Apple and the Apple Vision Pro, you look at Google and some of their most innovative projects, Meta, and then you look at the kind of products Tesla's putting out. Um, I don't know who said it in a note, but they said you look at some of these other multi-trillion-dollar tech giants and their level of innovation. You look at Tesla, and it's pretty clear Tesla has a lot of room to grow. Okay, I want to play more from the GM call, but let's go to the two hands we have quickly, and then we'll continue. Tessa Lee?
Hey Omar, hey everyone. So, you talked about the software aspect, but I'm originally from Detroit, the Motor City. Cars were in my blood, everything. My family, my dad worked for Ford. I sold cars all the time. So, I moved to California and I see all these Teslas. And when I really started looking into it, and I was like, oh, wow, that's like, you know, what a great company. And then you look into how they manufacture things, and then it's, even better. And then on top of that, FSD, which you showed me, you were here, I think it was in 2020, you were when you first got FSD, and that was just eye opener to me. You can see the vision of what Tesla has planned, and it's, I know you want to get to that thing, so I'll keep it short, but it's just amazing, and I appreciate it. Appreciate you showing me back then.
Well, don't appreciate me. I think appreciate the team that actually does this. Imagine being on this team and Elon goes, "Hey, here's a JPEG. Drive the car safely with this JPEG image. We can update it 36 times a second." And you're like, "Excuse me? I have to figure out how to drive the car safely with this 1.2 megapixel camera?" And they actually did it. That's the crazy part. And everyone was an asshole to them, whether they're a Tesla hater or a Tesla fan. They said, "Oh, these idiots, my car hit the brakes and there was nothing there. You dumbasses." And imagine being them, and the media's attacking you, even your customers think you're idiots. And, people are saying, "Oh, you're going to kill people." And they end up producing a solution that, taking self driving and enabling it to work in a pure vision system with an end to end model is just going to allow this technology to scale way faster. And I think it's going to end up saving so many lives that the team really deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. I think that is inevitably where this is going when you look at the impact this is going to have. Some people from Google and DeepMind recently won a Nobel Peace Prize for some of their work on AlphaFold. I believe that is the level of this contribution. You're only just starting to see people recognize it. Wall Street recognize it. It's interesting if you look at GM stock today. GM said this move is going to save us $1 billion a year, and yet their stock is down a little bit today, right? Why would the stock be down when they're saving $1 billion a year? Well, I think in part because of demand concerns. Why are they caring so much about cutting costs and being capital efficient? But also because people know that autonomy is the future, and that advances in AI mean it's happening rapidly, and that GM is now in a weaker position. Their management looks confused, and frankly, it's a black eye. I mean, just last year, they were saying Cruise was going to generate $50 billion in profit by 2030. Now, all of a sudden, they're shutting it down. I mean, hell, just last month, they announced a deal with Uber to have the Cruise robotaxis in the Uber app. You guys remember that? And they're like, you know what? Actually, we're going to shut it down. And one of the analysts actually asked on the call, he's like, "Hey, what about that Uber partnership?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I guess we're not doing that anymore." Luca?
Yes. I just want to endorse what JC said earlier, because it's so easy to talk now with the stock at all-time highs about how good FSD is, but you were doing this when the software was shitty and was improving, right? So it's I mean, it's hard to come along the way. I wrote about that today. We went all the way to $100, from $414 to $100 in terms of stock price. But people like you were guiding us to know exactly what was going on at the company. And it's not easy, because there are some bulls. I mean, quote bulls like Gary Black and Tesla Cat, and who are actually almost telling you to sell your stocks. So they are fake bulls in that sense, right? And if you don't really research about what the company will be in the future, when Elon put a fork in the road, you gotta read the signs. I'm still curious to know what happened with Zach. I mean, we know a little bit more about Drew Baglino, but Tesla of today is the Tesla of a shock. It's not a Tesla of Drew Baglino anymore, right? And for you to understand the fork in the road, you gotta follow the signal, and there are a lot of noise at the community, right? So I know it's hard. I know it's easy to talk now, stock over $120, but there will be a lot of drops. There will be a lot of oscillation. There will be a lot of adventure ahead, and I just think you gotta really research about the future and not what was going on in the past and selling cars and anything besides the autonomy, right? You posted a classic graphic yesterday of the leaders of autonomy, and Tesla was the last running for the autonomy. And how does it play today? So again, thank you, Omar. And I guess the takeaway is just endure the pressure and don't listen to fake bulls.
And Luca, get rid of that backpack.
Yeah,
Hello?
I mean,
Hello?
it is so funny when you talk about that chart and Navigant Research, Guidehouse Inside, Sam Abuelsamid. This guy's a total fucking moron. And I hear him on This Week in Tech. He goes, "Oh, Homar's blog, this fucking fanboy." I'm like, dude, look at your own chart, okay? Most of these companies that you said were years ahead of Tesla are now bankrupt, okay? They don't exist anymore. Every year, more and more of these companies that are ahead of Tesla just drop like flies. GM was like, Cruise was at the first position in the chart and Tesla was at the last. Well, guess what? There is no Cruise anymore. But yeah, I mean, it is really just crazy the mentality that people have with stock. So don't get too excited on the green days. Don't cry on the red days. You have to just understand that, look, this is really even more important than money. It's very, very rare that you see a technology emerge and brought to market like we're seeing here that just profoundly improves people's quality of life. And I don't think people, just fully appreciate how much that impact is going to be. Yet people are still very, very sort of confused. But
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
are.
yeah,
Can somebody hear me? This is the first time I've used this. I'm pretty new.
yeah. So it is true. I think there's a lot of people who, just completely turned on the company, turned on Elon. What they were doing was just as important as ever. But they said, well, we should fire Elon. Um, they said, the guy's lost his mind, and very few people, stuck around during the dark times. There'll be days like today where bulls are cheering, and there are going to be days in the future where the stock goes down 10% or 20%, and bears are cheering and saying, it'll go down from like 700 to 650, and the bears will be like, "Oh my God, see, I was right. It is a fraud." And there will be those days too, and there will be less people who are as enthusiastic. But this is a company that, you know, despite the risks, maybe it could go down significantly. I don't know. But you just look at the upside of what they're building. You look at the team behind it. You look at Elon Musk, and I would just kick myself if I sold. As a matter of fact, every time I've ever sold, I've kicked myself. And I think this is really just day one for the company. All right, so let's keep going with the Cruise conference call, which is what we were supposed to talk about here.
This approach would allow us to leverage the strengths of GM and Cruise while simplifying and accelerating the path forward, providing customers meaningful benefits along the way. We know people everywhere love to drive their own vehicles, but not in every situation. So it makes sense to develop autonomous technology for them. Given the considerable time and expense required to scale a robotaxi business in an increasingly competitive market, combining forces would be more efficient and therefore consistent with our capital allocation priorities. Together, we intend to leverage Cruise's AI technology, world-class engineering talent, and insights from more than 5 million driverless miles, and GM's strong brands, our scale, manufacturing expertise, and our experience with Super Cruise.
So they're folding GM and Cruise together, which, seems like a questionable proposition. Are they really going to be able to bring this technology to an average GM vehicle if there's some crappy Chevy they're selling on the lot? Probably not, right? But they think this is the best way forward, and they're basically admitting this just costs too much money. You can burn money on robo taxis and try and tell everyone, look, we're futuristic and we've got these driverless cars. But if it's fiscally unsustainable, then you don't really have a working solution at all. The time will eventually come, like GM right now, where they're under pressure and they're like, hey, we're not Mr. Moneybags. We're not Google over here. Google and their investors can just keep throwing money at this thing for 15 years and it's no problem. A GM, they have investors they have to report to. And that's essentially what this comes down to. As much as they're trying to spin it as some type of huge cost savings or some brilliant restructuring, it just comes down to the fact that they've invested a ton of money in this thing and they don't want to keep pouring money in indefinitely, which is why they have to focus now on personal autonomous vehicles.
Mary said, Cruise has been an early innovator in autonomy and a pioneer in the industry. Over the past year, we've seen unprecedented advancements in AI that are also reshaping AV development. Cruise has been part of this new wave of technology where traditional modular AI systems built with hand-wired custom logic are being replaced by foundation and end-to-end models. Our goal at GM is to bring AV technology safely into millions of GM vehicles. And the best way to do this is with a singular strategy that prioritizes the incremental delivery of autonomous capabilities. We plan to first leverage Super Cruise to expand to L3 and beyond on a path to fully autonomous personal vehicles. I believe success on this path is best achieved with a combined, focused effort from both the GM and Cruise engineering teams without the complexity of building and operating a robotaxi business. It's a smart pivot technically and would enable our customers to more quickly enjoy the benefits of autonomous driving technology, things like advanced safety, improved traffic flow, increased accessibility, and reduced driver stress.
So incremental improvements, personal autonomous vehicles. Essentially, they're coming out and saying Tesla's strategy is the right one. They're even going out and saying, hey, we're abandoning this rules-based system in favor of an end-to-end foundation world model approach. Essentially, trying to copy what Tesla's doing. The only difference is Tesla, which has been developing this for more than 4 years, has a product out right now that anybody can just buy a Tesla and start using. They want to start developing this. But it's a pretty shocking admission to Wall Street to say, hey, an end-to-end foundation model is the way forward. Because this was pretty controversial not that long ago. If you look at CES from January of 2024, Mobileye came out swinging, saying end-to-end will never work, regulators will never approve it, it's a black box, it just does not work. You need a more rules-based approach. And man, do they have egg on their face now because they were completely wrong. Not only does it work, it beats everything else on the market. It certainly blows anything from Mobileye out of the water. It's smoother and more natural than Waymo, than Cruise, than Zoox, than anybody. end to end is clearly the way forward. So to have GM admitting this and say this is part of the reason that we're shutting down Cruise is a pretty incredible admission to the street here. Eddie?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter what their desire is. I mean, if you look at the requirements to get this thing done, they don't have any of that. They don't have, Mary can't call Jensen to get a bunch of GPUs. They don't have a data center with megapacks to control the electricity to do this work. They don't have the engineers to even put this together and train the models. So, I mean, all this is just all talk.
Yeah, and someone actually asked in the Q&A section, which we're going to get to, they're like, well, Mary, you say that you're shutting down Cruise to be more capital efficient. In other words, you don't want to spend $1 billion a year on Cruise. You're cutting that in half now from 2 billion to 1 billion. But the approach that you're highlighting, the end-to-end foundation world model, is incredibly capital efficient. You have to buy billions of dollars of GPUs from NVIDIA to do this. So on one hand, you say you're cutting Cruise and doing what Tesla's doing, but what Tesla's doing is actually incredibly capital intensive as well. Paul?
I wonder if they might be looking at a partnership to lease Tesla's technology. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and that was one of the things that they talked about on the call as well. And Mary seemed to kind of leave the door open for that. She said, well, we want to leverage the investment we had in Cruise, but I mean, come on. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that this probably isn't going to work. First of all, GM constantly updating and pushing updates and making the software better. Yeah, right. Okay. I would love to see that. I would love to see them start doing over the air updates regularly. It just has been a disaster for legacy automakers, Ford telling people to bring their cars into dealerships. This has just never been their core competency, pushing out a software product of this capability. Really talking about one of the most advanced software products in the world here. And just in terms of the cost structure, the hardware on the Cruise vehicle is not going to be the hardware that they can put on an ordinary car. They're going to have to likely move to a pure vision system. And because of that, all the technology is not going to move over, right? I mean, they can try and use some of the people and teams and try and make a new version of something, but they're essentially throwing their investment in Cruise in the garbage. All electric?
Yeah, I just want to talk about like the hardware suite. So the hardware suite on the Cruise, I've been doing some grokking. And what Grok is telling me is that the hardware suite on Cruise costs about $50,000. So I feel like someone at Cruise, someone at
And
GM,
most GM cars are not even $50,000 total,
right?
right?
So like they have to outsource it to somebody else because like a Tesla where they can put a full package together in a car like the Model 3, a fantastic, especially the new Highland Model 3, with all the hardware required for FSD, and it's in the car and it's 30 some $1,000s. I mean, that to me is just got to be the writing on the wall for GM.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a point that's not well appreciated by investors and by the general public because we see a self-driving car, we go, okay, the car's driving itself. It looks the same to us. We may notice that one has a bunch of sensors on the roof and one looks like a normal car, but self-driving is self-driving from most people's perspective. But when you drill down into the unit economics, it really is astounding. Because what Tesla has done here, and this is, pretty typical for Musk companies actually, is build something that does more with less. It actually has a smoother, more natural drive without the requirement for mapping and without the requirement for a ton of additional sensors that you don't find on a typical car. So their unit economics stand alone in terms of delivering a profitable experience. And they're making billions of dollars a year selling FSD and selling their cars certainly that run FSD. Their competitors are losing billions of dollars a year. So when you really look at the licensing opportunity, and I think GM will have to go to suppliers for this, and Ford and BMW and others will have to go to suppliers for this. Tesla is uniquely positioned to deliver on that supplier promise of a personal autonomous vehicle that can work anywhere in the world, that can be low cost, and you can actually put that hardware on your vehicle. So this is going to be, I think, a bigger business than the auto business for them. I think if you look at the auto business excluding FSD, you look at the earnings coming from that, from the actual selling of the cars, I think FSD licensing to other automakers will be bigger, right? Because we have, 80 million cars sold. Tesla makes, less than 2 million of them. There's many more non-Tesla cars than Tesla cars. If you can license it, the whole model just essentially gets unbounded from production. And that's when things start to look really interesting. And I think a lot of people probably think, well, there's probably going to be several solutions, which I think there will be long term. But today, the unit economics are really profoundly, starkly different. Robbie?
Hey, Omar, thanks for hosting this space. I was wondering, when Elon's traveling around the world talking with all these leaders and politicians, do you think he's talking about the wave that's about to happen with his autonomous vehicles and the economics of it with other countries? And also with that, do you think there's a possibility of a nationwide rollout here in the United States in 2025 with Trump being in office? Or could you give a percentage chance if you want to speculate? Thanks.
Um, I think he's talking to everybody about it. I think he can't shut up about it. In terms of 2025, we'll have to see what happens. Congress is kind of unpredictable, but I would hope to see Congress introduce within the first 100 days self-driving legislation that gives the federal government the authority to certify a vehicle for use nationwide. Now, in terms of when that'll actually be achieved technically, I think we've got a shot at maybe Q4 2025 if all goes well. Could easily slip into 2026. But having that national policy in place as opposed to the state by state that we see today, I think is going to be really important. Paul?
Yeah, I want to kind of go back to the full self-driving licensing thing. And do you remember back in 2017, also during production hell, Elon said that he went to Apple, and Apple essentially turned him down and said, you got a car that's nice, but we don't see it going to profitability. And now that they're doing all these technological advances and more or less killing it in the technology sector and the automotive sector, I wonder if Apple is kicking themselves in the butt at a missed opportunity for the software licensing.
Well, yeah, I think Apple passed up an opportunity to acquire a multi-trillion dollar company. So I would probably be kicking myself too if I were Tim Cook. Anyway, let's go through more of the call.
Thank you, Dave. I'd like to start by expressing my appreciation for all of the advancements that Cruise has made to autonomous technology as this positions us well moving forward. Over the past year, we've been assessing our self-driving technology strategy, and we engage with potential investors. However, none of these options seem to serve the best interests of the business and our shareholders, mainly because launching and operating a robotaxi business is expected to require a significant amount of incremental time and capital beyond the $10 billion we have already invested.
$10 billion invested in Cruise, now flushed down the toilet. If they had put $100 bills as toilet paper in GM's bathroom and let GM employees wipe their ass with that money for years, they couldn't have even burned $10 billion. And what do they have to show for this? Nothing. Okay? No robo-taxi business. They say they're going to fold it into Super Cruise. They're essentially abandoning it. They're folding the employees into the company. They're buying shares. So this is the conclusion that everybody else in the autonomy game is coming to. We can't lose money on this forever, right? We just can't. We have to answer to investors. They're sitting here saying we put 10 billion in this and what did we get? We got our permit pulled and people complaining that we ran someone over. So, how many more tens of billions of dollars are we going to invest before we call this a failure? Why don't we just pull the plug now? That's really kind of where they arrived with it. And it's not the most forward thinking decision. It's your typical, business school manager decision. Um, and I don't think they're really in a good position, honestly, as leaders to guide the company through this period. They seem very confused about what to do.
Discussions are ongoing with our minority shareholders to explore the acquisition of the shares of Cruise that we do not own. We've already reached an agreement with several of the largest minority Cruise shareholders that will raise our ownership to more than 97% and anticipate purchasing the remaining shares by early 2025. We plan to share more information during our Q4 earnings call in January and provide further details in the first half of the year once the Cruise restructuring is finalized. However, upon completion of the restructuring, we anticipate achieving annual cost savings of more than $1 billion, reducing our current annual expenditure of approximately $2 billion by more than half. This restructuring was not factored into the comments we made at our Investor Day in October regarding our early expectations about 2025, and therefore would be a source of upside, all else being equal.
So they're spending $2 billion a year on Cruise right now. And they say, hey, well, the upside is we're saving $1 billion a year. So even by shutting it down, they're only able to eliminate half the expense, which is a little bit odd. They're also going to have to buy out the minority shareholders in order to fold it into GM. There's going to have to be a vote of the Cruise board. So essentially they have to buy the rest of Cruise. They only own about 90% of it. That's obviously going to cost some money as well. So, you're only saving $1 billion and you're having to buy out the rest of the shareholders in order to buy it in. They're, there's really no clean cut here, right? It's a very sort of complicated process, even to try and salvage the situation where they're losing $2 billion a year. And I think CFRA had an interesting note out that I think kind of was where my head is at as well. Let me see if I can pull this up here. Um, CFRA analyst Garrett Nelson downgraded General Motors from hold to sell with a price target of 45 from 50. The analyst comments, we lower our 12-month target by $5 to 45 based on a 2025 PE of 4.5x, a steep but justified discount to historic averages. Last night, GM announced plans to pull the plug on its Cruise robotaxi business. We consider this news a step in the right direction for GM, as we think investors were losing patience with its hefty spending of $10 billion related to robotaxi development with very little to show for its investment. We were skeptical the effort was going to turn the corner anytime soon and think GM's decision to pare back spending could reflect larger concerns related to auto demand and its profitability over the next several quarters. In our opinion, the announcement is also a black eye for the credibility of GM management that as recently as last year told investors the Cruise business would generate $50 billion in annual revenue by 2030. We lower our rating to sell as concerns relate to near and longer term market share losses grow with GM's lack of hybrid exposure and now its exit from the robotaxi race. So, really, how bad are sales that they're, having to kind of make these kinds of cuts? We know they've been unprofitable in China. They say they want to get that business back to profitability. But you really have a situation here where they've also now shut down their battery factory. Um, they've sold their stake in that back to LG. So after the past run up in 2021 when Tesla started taking off, they said, "Oh, we're making all these EV investments. We're investing in battery factories. We've got these investments in autonomy. We're going to put more money into these autonomy plays." And now they're really sort of backing out. They're, trying to sell their stake. They're trying to fold down Cruise. They're essentially in damage control mode as their core business deteriorates. And I agree, it is a black eye for management. I mean, you do start to lose credibility when you're talking about all these things, and then you just sort of give up. Why did you invest in this battery factory in the first place? Why did you buy this company if you were just going to shut it down? You didn't think going for outside capital was an option. It honestly reminds me of the EV1, right? Before we had this huge explosion in EVs, GM actually had one of the first great EVs. It was called the EV1. And they bought them all back and they crushed them and they took them from their owners, right? And that was actually a big part of the reason of why Tesla was started. It's like GM had the future. They had EVs in their hand and they just threw it away. And now it's kind of the same thing with autonomy. They actually had a robo-taxi business. As a matter of fact, the first driverless ride I ever took in San Francisco, it was a Cruise robotaxi. So they were, again, kind of the first to give rides to the public, and now they've just kind of thrown that all away. GM is just kind of a chronically mismanaged company, it seems like, and I think Mary Barra shares a lot of blame for that, frankly.
Before we start the Q&A, I'd like to make one last comment. In this dynamic environment, agility and capital efficiency are key success factors. Last week, we announced a deal to sell our interest in the Lansing battery plant back to LGES. This move is designed to better align our current cell capacity with the prevailing market conditions. We also recently announced progress in our restructuring efforts in China, which we do not anticipate will require any capital to be injected. These actions should help us achieve our target of returning the China business to profitability next year. Today, we're applying the same principle, and I want to emphasize that we remain committed to investing in driver assistance and autonomous technology, as we firmly believe in the importance to make driving safer, more accessible, and less stressful. Our focus is on implementing this technology in a pragmatic and capital-efficient manner, along with capitalizing on the revenue opportunities along the way from Super Cruise and L3 technology.
Yeah, these guys have no idea what they're doing. The SAE levels are not a blueprint. It's not like, oh, let's go to level 3, then let's go to level 4. This is just, you have to really go for a system that can handle all of driving. There is no sort of halfway. These SAE levels were conceived before we ever really tried to work on autonomy. And there's really a bunch of sort of blurry lines in between them. So they're kind of still thinking about this in an incremental way. They're still thinking about this in terms of supervised autonomy, which would have been a great strategy 40 years ago when Tesla did it. Here in 2024, shipping supervised autonomy in a few years isn't going to move the needle. You need a system that is, bordering on unsupervised at this point. And yeah, it's just, it's all just this PR speak, right? They're trying to cut the costs and avoid the blowback. They are just like, well, thank you so much, Cruise, for your contributions. Thank you so much. We're firing you all, right? Well, we continue to really believe in the importance of driver assistant autonomy, which is why we're cutting $1 billion from their budget and, shutting down the company. It's like, really? So, there's just kind of, I think, a fundamental dishonesty there. They're trying to, I think, kind of pull the wool over our eyes rather than actually deliver a strategy that makes GM a winner in the autonomous world, which, I think it's hopeless, right? These guys are dinosaurs standing there like deer in the headlights, watching the asteroid of end-to-end self-driving come straight at their face. Tessa Lee?
Yeah, I actually it goes back to the other one. They're trying to save as much money as they can because if you've ever checked their inventory levels of these products that are their bread and butter, which are the trucks, they have tens of thousands of trucks still on dealer lots. So they are able to consider it a sale on the GM side when they give the car to the dealer. That's considered a sale for them. But what people fail to realize is the car really isn't sold. It's just on the dealer's lot. Now the dealer has to try to sell them, and nobody's buying these big heavy duty trucks, the Silverado 150s or the GMC trucks, because nobody wants them anymore. They're too expensive. They raised the price too much. So in the last few quarters, yeah, it may look like that they did really well, that they sold a ton of cars, but they just went into the dealers, and it was called channel stuffing, when the dealer takes all the inventory. So the GM business looks good, but now the dealers are stuck with these cars, and now they're starting to refuse allocations. The dealers are. So they're in a lot of trouble. A lot of a lot of the manufacturers, legacy ones, are in huge trouble. I mean, look at Nissan. So they're trying to save as much money as they can. So that $1 billion that they're saving, you know, it's they're trying to save as much as they can.
Yeah, these guys are selling Telegram machines, and the iPhone just came out. Okay. So you can, try and do some clever marketing. You can say, hey, a Telegram is more personal than a phone call. That's what they said when phones came out. But the writing's kind of on the wall. People don't send telegrams anymore. The market for manually driven gas cars is getting much smaller. And many of these automakers, before we even have widespread autonomy, they're already fighting for their life. They can't even deal with the current business climate, let alone the massive disruptions that are coming to everything from the powertrain to the user interface of the product to the business models that people use to consume transportation services. All electric.
Yeah, I mean, GM is going to continue to do this damage control. I mean, simple math, 2 minus 1, you still have $1 billion that you're losing from Cruise, which is just incredible. But I really think, like, I want to be in the room when the GM board sees that Tesla has released in Texas and in California the unsupervised robotaxi network, and like basically a Tesla is essentially saying to GM, "Here, hold my beer," because I mean it's just going to be an incredible moment in history, and the fact that GM is really just shitting the bed on this and just going in a completely opposite direction of where they should be going.
If GM wants to survive, they need to announce a licensing deal with Tesla for FSD tomorrow. Because it's going to take them 3 to 5 years to integrate this into their cars. That's just how long it takes them to develop a new vehicle. And by that time, we're probably going to be in a fully autonomous world. There'll be very few cars that don't have some type of advanced AI built in. So they should get moving now. And if they do, they have a chance at actually making some money in the autonomous age, right? Everyone's going to need self-driving cars. If they can make a self-driving car too, and self-driving actually works because it's the technology Tesla's developed, then they could still make quite a lot of money. Maybe not as much money as, the autonomy provider's making, but there's still going to be an opportunity to sell a lot of cars. Paul?
Yeah, and that too, with the license with Tesla, it would save a ton of R&D money. It probably can't go backwards, but definitely going forward, I would definitely consider a GM product if it had, say, uh, Tesla full self-driving software enabled by subscription. I remember when Apple first introduced CarPlay, I was literally searching online which vehicles have CarPlay, and that was my focus for purchase. Like which car has CarPlay would be on my radar. So I think it would put GM back on the map if they subscribe to some sort of a Tesla linear integration of full self-driving.
Yeah, that's so true. The technology really is becoming more and more of a focal point in how you decide the vehicle. And it's very true with FSD. I won't drive any vehicle that doesn't have FSD. It's just not in consideration for me as a daily driver. And I think more and more people, as they experience FSD 13, are going to come away with the same mentality. They're going to start getting addicted. Once you experience just being able to say where you want to go, push a button, and your car takes you there, you'll never want a car where you have to hold the wheel and any wrong move you could just crash. You got to be paying attention all the time for hours. um, it's just so clearly better, especially when you try the latest versions like 13. And it's amazing. Just a lot of people in my life have Teslas. Yesterday I was driving my girlfriend's car. I took it to get washed, and then I was driving this other Tesla we were selling. I was driving my dad's car. My profile was syncing between all these cars. All my FSD settings were syncing, and all these cars have FSD, which is kind of a normal thing now. But when I started testing FSD in 2020, very few people were allowed to have it. Right? There were probably 200 people outside Tesla who were allowed to have FSD. So to see this world today where everybody has a car and everybody has FSD and everybody's actually using FSD is pretty remarkable. Scott?
Hey Omar, thanks for hosting. You're a great host, and yeah, we love these. Two things to consider with GM. Like I work in the auto industry, and yeah, things are a little slower right now. Seems like everybody's trying to use up inventory. I think with GM, they have something to worry about though with Trump in the Oval Office, because for the last few years they've been able to sell black SUVs, Escalades, Suburbans, all those things to government without probably having a second bidder. And they've been able to make massive profits. That's their number one most profitable part of their clientele. And now they're going to have to likely go against EVs, likely go against other, Doge approved bidders, and I think that's gonna hurt their EPS. But also, yeah, it's obvious that they need to license from Tesla, but I don't think that they even comprehend the technology that a Model 3 has in it. That they're going to have to, the supply line that they're going to need to be able to have an autonomous vehicle. I don't think it's even occurred to them yet. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, listen, I know there's people listening from some of these legacy automakers. And let me tell you, do you want to be unemployed? If the answer is no, go email your CEO and show him your Tesla with FSD, or rent a Tesla with FSD and show him and tell them we need to license this right now. Look, what do we have to lose? If it doesn't work out, then we don't have to put it in the vehicle. But let's get started as a backup plan, integrating this into the vehicle just in case. And it could literally be the difference between our company dying and surviving. I truly believe that without hyperbole. Tessa Lee?
Yeah, you say it's going to take at least 3 to 5 years for them to integrate. I don't think they have 3 to 5 years. And I'm sorry for any auto worker that is listening. I have a lot of family, a lot of friends that work at, from Detroit. So their mentality is not the same. I don't think they're going to last 3 years to be able to transition quick enough. They're just not fast. Look how long it's taken them to get NACS going. I mean, that's not as difficult, I don't think, as installing cameras and FSD software. So, yeah, it's really not looking good for them.
Okay, now we're at the fun part of the call because we're at the analyst Q&A. And the analysts, of course, are listening to this, and even they know this is a big steaming pile of horseshit. So it's a little bit funny to hear their questions. We're going to go to that in a second. But first, let me thank my sponsor, Joa. You can see the link up at the top there. Use the code HOLMARS for 5%. Joa makes the world's best Tesla accessories. Anything you could want. I love their phone mount, their USB hub. They've got great mats. Pretty much anything you could want for your Tesla, Joa's got one. I've even got their Joa electric scooter. I keep it in my trunk. It can be kind of useful sometimes. So you're looking for a holiday gift for yourself, for the Tesla fans in your life, check out Joa up at the top. All right, let's go to the first analyst question.
Great, thank you. Maybe a related question. It seems like the theme here is to focus on more capital efficiency. I think what we've seen from other players in the industry is that developing an advanced ADAS or driver out or eyes off system, it can be incredibly capital efficient, and sometimes it might be more efficient to use a partner. So could you give us a sense in your development of the next gen ADAS plus autopilot system, how you view the go it alone versus partnership approach?
Well, I think, Dan, one of the things we really want to do is leverage the investment that has been made in Cruise. And so if we were able to do this, it would enable us to leverage, as Dave said, the technology and the work that they've done from a model, some of the work from a sensor perspective that can be leveraged in L3, L3 Plus, and beyond. And so we think there's many pieces of work from Cruise, along with the expertise that the team would bring, working with our team and building on Cruise, that would really allow us to continue to build on the strong system we have with Super Cruise right now that externally is recognized as being one of the best driver assistance technologies. And so we want to leverage what already has been done as we go forward in this. And we think we can do that very effectively.
And fair to say that any such development would be done through the scope or lens of capital efficiency?
Well, yes, we're always looking to drive capital efficiency, and that's when we looked at the amount of money to deploy a robotaxi business and then to maintain that business and grow it. It's quite a bit of capital, and as you know, a robotaxi business is not General Motors' core business. But we do believe that from a personal autonomous vehicle perspective and driver assistance technology that continues at Cruise, at Super Cruise, we're already adding more and more technology that this could be something that would be, I think, fairly substantial. And I think Dave would like to add a little bit more.
Yeah, I just want to, yes, investing in compute, but we are already investing in compute and have been doing so. I think this is really that, acknowledging that pursuing one path to autonomy is way more efficient than two. And I think, as Mary said, based on our Super Cruise capabilities, the work Cruise is doing, we're really going to be able to drive more ROI as a result.
So a couple of really interesting things in that first question by Dan Levy. First, the billion-dollar question. Are you going to do it yourself or are you going to partner with somebody? So GM is coming out and they're saying, well, guess what? We're going to fold Cruise into GM and we're going to develop personal autonomous vehicles internally. The analysts are listening and saying, really? I mean, even they don't believe that GM is going to succeed. If they couldn't succeed at, doing a robotaxi business and they couldn't make money doing that, what are the chances they're going to be successful in a personal autonomous vehicle? And, again, Cruise was a completely separate company. It was on the other side of the country. Mary Barra's out there in Detroit. Cruise is out there in San Francisco. They started as a startup. They went through Y Combinator. They were started by Kyle Vogt from Twitch, experienced tech investor. They succeeded because they were far away from GM. And this was like the best thing going on in GM. The whole company was a dumpster fire. But people were like, well, at least they have Cruise, right? And it was successful because it was a San Francisco tech company. They bought it, but it really had nothing to do with GM. So to just say, we're going to fold that in and try and do it internally, this is in all likelihood going to be a complete disaster. And I'm excited to hear the stories about what a disaster it is. I mean, I hope I'm wrong and they're able to integrate it smoothly and, come up with a great product for their customers and just bring safety forward. But I can just imagine this being extremely challenging. And, back to the question about suppliers versus doing it in-house, here they are coming out and saying, you know what, we're tired of burning so much money. We've already wasted $10 billion on this, and we don't want to be spending another $1 billion a year or more. But then they say instead we're going to do an ADAS system that's an end-to-end world model. Well, how are you going to do that if you're saying you're already spending too much money. Have you asked Elon what the bill is for that Cortex facility in Texas? 50,000 H100s with 50,000 more coming in, liquid cooling, just the rent on that thing, that much space, the engineers you need who even know how to figure out how to hook the damn thing up with a million wires. Where's the GM GPU cluster going to be? Right? Next to the, Ford Pinto factory in Detroit? I don't know. But you're here saying, well, we can't afford 2 billion. We're gonna invest maybe 1 billion. Yeah, well, good luck training a foundation world model when you're trying to skimp on your GPU budget. This thing is gonna suck, right? Which is why the analysts are listening to this and saying they're gonna have to go to Tesla. Tesla went and bought the GPUs. They trained the model. They can now deploy it to the car, and the marginal cost of deploying it to a GM car is what? $1,000, $2,000 worth of hardware compared to, $10 billion of GPU investment. And you know what? You could give General Motors $100 billion worth of GPUs and they wouldn't know what to do with it. Those things would be sitting there spinning, burning up electricity, and they just have a huge power bill and no autonomy. So any analyst who has half a brain is listening to them and saying, really, you're going to develop autonomy in-house, personal autonomous vehicle? No, you're not. You're going to give up, just like you did with Cruise, and you're going to have to go to a supplier. And, I think, like, really long-term projects like this require a lot of tenacity, right? GM couldn't see the future with the EV1. They shut it down. EVs ended up becoming huge. They couldn't see the future with their robotaxi business. They shut it down. A lot of this is just having the courage to just stick with something, you know, and just investors are getting mad at you. People are getting mad at you. They're laughing at you, and you just got to stick with it. And I think that's a big part of Elon's success. Paul?
He doesn't say anything. He knows something about risk management and how to take risk if it's something that essentially is important. I remember one of his fellow PayPal buddies saying that. But I think that GM, if they license first full self driving, the cost will be pennies on the dollar for them versus what they're paying now for Super Cruise lidars. And lidars was a mistake, and I'm glad that Elon called it out. And there's so many clips of him saying, "You're wasting money. You'll see, it's trash." If we solve vision, this is gonna be the solution. Just like a human navigates through an environment with nothing but our eyeballs. Um, if we're able to do that, all we have to do is solve vision, and it will work. And now look at it. The first self driving is so smooth that in your videos, man, I'm so impressed by the car. And what geeks me out is that I have a 2020 that I can now literally make it a 2024 by just simply a software update. Like, there's no other car in the market that I would buy brand new today that I think is better than my 2020 Model X.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. Everyone just getting the holiday update as we speak. I got it on a couple cars, and really great new features. Sirius XM. You used to have to buy a whole new car to get satellite radio. They had to put new hardware on the thing. This is just a software update. And guess what? Everybody gets a 30-day free trial. It's pretty nice. Joseph?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Omar was just saying because it's just such an excellent point about the requiring a cluster for training. So I work at Los Alamos National Laboratory, which is famous for having supercomputers, and these things typically take years to stand up. They have crazy energy and cooling needs. You have to build the refrigeration units are bigger than the supercomputer themselves, and I mean, they're these huge multi-year undertakings. Now, people keep pointing to how Elon turned over this ridiculous size cluster in a matter of months, but you'll also note that everyone who has talked about that has pointed out that no one has ever done that before. And I don't think GM or any other car maker is going to move faster than industry standard. And I just want to say it's true. Setting up these clusters will take years. Getting their own training data and doing their own thing will take years. I don't think another solution is practical for anyone. I bet the licensing deals start happening this year, and I bet companies will fall in line very quickly, because I think once they figure out what is required to pull this off, with a supercluster just being one example of things that take years, companies have got to do this. I bet they do it this year, and I bet it takes 2 or 3 years to roll out. And I bet Tesla adds $1 trillion to their market cap just from the licensing deals.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, we don't see these superclusters that are training the AI model that drives our car, but like these are like massive machines. Like we're talking about like a car factory. So many computers and I mean just cooling these things, right? Because they generate heat as they run. I- And you listen to Jensen. Jensen was like shocked. He's like, "What are these guys like what are these guys smoking over at XAI? I've never seen somebody bring up a cluster like this so quickly. This normally takes years." And like, what is Elon putting in their breakfast that they're doing this? I don't know. Um, but yeah, they don't know what to do with the GPUs. Even if they placed an order for, building a GM supercluster today, by the time they got the GPU cluster up, Tesla would be giving unsupervised rides. Okay, that's really where we are. So this is just a pretty shocking admission by GM. They're basically coming out in this call and saying, "Hey, you know what? Tesla's actually got the right strategy. We think, that's the right strategy. We're folding, we're going with that." But they're so far behind that it doesn't come out as sort of this triumphant pivot. They come out just looking like they're really playing catch up and that it's kind of a hopeless situation. So why would you want to go out and admit that really Tesla has the right approach here? I don't know. Yoda?
Yeah. Hey, first, congrats on that 420.69 purchase today. That was mad skills. I don't know how'd you did it. I thought you were gonna buy 69 shares.
Well, there's something called a stop limit order. So I don't know why anyone would want to do this, but you can say wait until it goes up and then put in a limit buy order. So I said when it hits 429, I will buy it for no more than 420.69. And I was able to buy a share at that price. So I feel very good about that. And I've
Yeah,
already made a
yeah,
few bucks on that share.
for sure. Yeah, did you guys also cover how Elon unlocked kind of this ceiling of the 30,000 H100s versus 100,000?
What do you mean?
So I think quote unquote traditionally, or what the setup has been so far, is that these AI clusters has been around 35,000 GPUs in the data centers. But with the XAI, I think Elon went hands-on and worked with the engineers to make the 100,000 GPUs be coherent, acting as one. So that was covered, I think, in the all-in from last Friday.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that's definitely interesting. Joseph?
Yeah, I was going to comment on that since you brought it up. Yeah, go listen to the All In podcast. They talk about this, but 32,000 of these, I don't remember the exact flops, but it's like on the exascale flop. And if you look up the top 500 list for supercomputers, you'll find that right now we've been bordering on the exascale for supercomputing. And one of the things they point out on the podcast is GPUs are lightning fast at crunching numbers. And so when you have to communicate from one GPU to another across like a giant data center distance and in like these 3D thing, anyways, it just gets very hard for the communication to keep up with how fast the GPUs are. It's like a limiting thing. And I don't know what Elon did, but they were talking about on the podcast that basically they came up with some type of innovative breakthrough to where they were able to solve some of the communication problems to where now they're getting good throughput up to 100,000 GPUs. And if that's true, which I'm sure it is, it would be really interesting to see uh, what their total flops are of that supercluster, because in principle, it's going to be several exaflops.
Yeah, Tesla gets pretty hardcore, as do all of Elon's companies. And, I think what's remarkable about the XAI cluster is they're actually just using straight up Ethernet as opposed to NVIDIA's InfiniBand. I think they said, hey, you know what? Like, this is like the standard space solution. It's low cost. Everybody's got an Ethernet connector, let's go with Ethernet. And at Tesla, they actually have given presentations about something called Tesla Transport Protocol. So they're like, hey, well, we're not even going to use TCP/IP. This is obviously unsuitable for training workloads. We're going to develop this sort of Tesla Transport Protocol that, is our own transport layer that's really optimized for this. And they worked on that as part of Dojo. I wouldn't be surprised to see them using it at Tesla in their NVIDIA cluster as well as XAI. And that's kind of the level they go down to. I mean, I don't really know if that was used or not, but I think it's just a great example of they don't just accept, well, TCP/IP, of course. They go, well, can we eke out performance gains by actually writing our own transport protocol? Yoshi?
Hey, Omar. Thanks again for putting this together. I just want to go back to the topic of GM. I'm obviously not a shareholder of GM, but I don't understand why the board has not fired Mary Barra. I mean, we all remember the three biggest blunders that she's done in the past few years, like the partnership with Nicola, the recent cruise, separation, right? And then the other one, the discontinuation of the Chevy Bolt, just to reverse that decision. Like, why do we consider that CEO responsible for her fiduciary duties towards the shareholders? Like, and on the other token, you have an Elon Musk that for having an exponential growth in the share price has not done any of these blunders or nothing illegal. We're holding the pay package. So I really don't understand why the SEC is not doing an investigation in GM, because it really smells like fraud. So that is like something very strange. And I hope that in the future, in the near future, something could be investigated there. Like, I really don't understand. And my second point is, moving towards the battle of ADA systems. The way I see it is the battle of OS systems. Similar to what we had between Windows versus iOS, for example. I see that's the way I understand it, at least for me, with Tesla FSD and the multiple FSD projects that exist in the world. In my opinion, I think Tesla is gonna be the dominant OS in the near future. I don't know if you guys saw the post from George Hotz. He's basically saying the same thing, that Tesla is gonna be the dominant number one, followed by Comma AI. I personally have zero experience with Comma AI. I haven't been driven in a Comma AI vehicle. I'm in Canada. I'm not even sure if Comma AI is available in Canada. But to be honest, I'm not quite sure how far Comma AI, or how close Comma AI is to Tesla FSD. But I think Tesla FSD is gonna be the number one dominant application that could be potentially, if Tesla decides to really go out and license it, right, and not just keeping it under closed doors. Thank you, Omar.
Yeah, so I mean, Comma AI, if you know their founder, George Hotz, this guy is just an incredibly brilliant guy. A lot of you may know him as Geo Hot. When he was 17 years old, he figured out how to jailbreak the iPhone. Before the iPhone was allowed to run third-party apps, I was running third-party apps thanks to George Hotz figuring out a way to root into the device. And he was always, they were always patching the security holes, and he would come up with a new one. Like, this guy is extremely talented, right? And he founded Comma. It's actually kind of a funny story. When Tesla and Mobileye broke up, Elon called him. He said, "Look, I'll pay you $12 million to replace Mobileye, but it's 1 million less for every month it takes. So it takes you 3 months, $9 million." And George Hotz thought about it and he said, "That's a horrible deal. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to actually just start my own company instead." And he started Comma. So normally when someone has a self-driving company, you always hear him saying, "Ours is the best. We're going to win self-driving." George Hotz is unique in that he's just incredibly honest and blunt, right? You don't hear any of this BS PR speak from him. So he's like, "Look, straight up, Tesla's going to win. But we think we could be number two." And, I think the approach they're taking is certainly a lot more capital efficient and promising than anything else. But
Yeah,
yeah,
totally. Let's not forget about Green Hill. Green Hill software. Maybe that's gonna be top two. I don't know.
yeah,
Let's not forget about that clown, man.
yeah.
They got to find a way to keep planes up in the sky first.
Yeah, he's been pretty quiet lately. But on your other comment about Mary Barra, unfortunately, I don't think it's fraud to just be a really bad CEO, and that's what she is. I mean, if you just look at the stock price performance, it is abysmal. How the board hasn't fired her, I have no clue. Okay, N- nobody. If you're a janitor and you're this bad at your job, you know the floors haven't been mopped for 10 years, you'd get fired. But how many fuck ups can one person have, from partnering with Trevor Milton, who then gets arrested for fraud, oops, to buying and shutting down Cruise, to you name it. I mean, she is really a horrible CEO. And frankly, um, I think that one of America's biggest industrial giants has suffered under her leadership. So she probably should be fired. I agree. I don't think she's committed fraud, but yeah. Hey, Meta, thanks for
Should
joining
buy
us.
stock back.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, just wondering, your general thoughts before I go to the next question on the call. Just your general thoughts on GM's announcement, their sort of admission that an end-to-end world model they think is the solution, and their decision to fold Cruise into the company.
I think folding Cruise in the company is just one of those. They, I could be wrong here, but they have a really hard time hiring people. So they created Cruise as a way of being like, "Hey, you're not working for GM. You're working for this new startup, Cruise." And if they were to just shut down Cruise, it would be embarrassing. So like, this feels like a good way to admit Cruise failed, and then they can kind of shuffle it into GM somewhere and then pretend like, "Oh, we're just not going to go with this project anymore." I don't think they're going to be able to do anything. I honestly see this as a bankruptcy equivalent event.
Yeah, they're basically trying to paper it over, make it look nice. Hey, we're not shutting down the company. We're actually going to tell them to come move from San Francisco to Detroit and come work at GM. It's great. And yeah, of course.
And everybody's going to obviously go to Detroit. And then when nobody goes to Detroit, they're going to be like, "Oh, that's why we couldn't do that world model," right? That was the word that Tesla was using and Nvidia was using, right? Did I get the buzzword right?
Yeah, so there are a small number of engineers worldwide who know and have experience training a foundation world model for safe autonomous driving using just computer vision. And not one of them wants to go work for General Motors. Not one. Some of them were willing to work for maybe Cruise in San Francisco, but come work for Mary Barra in Detroit. And, you know, hey, we just fired all your friends. Want to come work for us? Probably not. You know. Um,
Taking a paycheck is really different than reporting to someone.
yeah. But yeah, I think definitely the sort of acquihire aspect of it, their inability to sort of find this talent on their own is probably a big part of it. But how many of them will stick around? I mean, the sad truth is, you're just delaying getting laid off until some later point in the future when they give up on this too. Paul, or sorry, go ahead, Meta. Then Paul.
I was going to ask, like, if Cruise didn't, sorry, if GM didn't buy this, what percentage of Cruise did GM own? Do you remember?
More than 90%. And they say
Right.
they've reached a deal, I think, to get it to 97% now, and they're still negotiating with the remaining 3% of shareholders.
So, like, if Cruise went bankrupt, wouldn't GM have to declare a giant loss?
Um, well, it's not really a bankruptcy, it's more of a merger, right? So they're just going to essentially fold it into GM. You cut all the costs. It's kind of like a bankruptcy in the sense, but GM still pays all the creditors and everything. So it's really kind of, they're shutting it down, but they're sort of structuring it as a merger. Paul? Oh, hey,
Yeah, GM
is this
GM did that
really
also
George Hotz
years.
who's requesting to
Yeah,
speak?
GM. I hope so. If he is, then he can go before me. But
It's him.
Okay, well, hell yeah.
before
Let's get George Hotz up here.
I'll acquiesce.
Great. George, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's I've been listening for like a couple minutes now. Not too many engineers who know how to train a foundation world model, you say?
So, what are your thoughts on GM's announcement yesterday?
That it's 5 years too late. Could have saved them a couple billion if they listened.
Yeah, I was actually reading your blog post from 5 years ago, and you said when Cruise is shut down, they'll be folded into GM. And here we are.
Now, the controversial one is when Waymo is shut down, they're going to be folded into Google, and I still believe that.
Wow, that's a pretty big prediction. A lot of people view them as, the leader in self-driving today.
Well, the problem is they don't have unit economics. And that's like what it's going to come down to, right? It's not a question of can Waymo solve self-driving cars. I believe they totally can. The question is how much of a lead will they have on, say, Tesla, who can build the cars for so much cheaper? Like they built something, they might have at most 2 to 5 years to make all the money back that they invested before it's commoditized, and they just won't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really what you've been harping on since the beginning is it comes down to economics. You can try and run a service like this for some time, but eventually you're going to see what GM is seeing here where they said, "Look, 10 billion, we don't want to put any more cash into this." And you've really been, I think, credited from the beginning with even before Tesla saying an end-to-end world model is the way, it's the only way. And you now have GM coming out here and saying, "Hey, this is the way forward." I remember not too long ago, this was kind of controversial. You had Mobileye coming out at CES strongly against end to end. Was it surprising to you to see even GM admitting that this is really where the industry's going now?
I mean, again, 10 years too late. And by the way, people give me credit to say that I said it before Tesla. That's not really true. Like, Tesla always knew the solution was end to end. It was just a question of how quickly we're going to get there. But yeah, no, companies like Cruise were just not saying it. They were explicitly betting on something else. And there is, just no way to make money off that.
Meta?
Out of curiosity, George, I'm curious how you see the unit economics for Waymo changing. I know that they're announcing Gen 5 to Gen 6. Obviously, we have to see it if it's not vaporware. Sorry. A 30% reduction, I think, sensors. Do you think they're going to continue to reduce sensors, or do you think
But
that it's just not, there's not enough
this
runway.
isn't even the problem. Okay, so like in something like Uber, you have market dynamics. So you have a moat. If you can spend a lot of money to build up a market, because the marketplace is two-sided, it's really hard for incumbents to come in and compete. Whereas with something like Waymo, it looks a lot more like scooters, right? Anybody with capital can flood the market with tons of self-driving cars, right? The robo-taxis of the future is going to look like Bird and Lime and Wheels. And so, yeah, like Waymo can reduce their spend, but can they get it anywhere near Tesla? They're buying Jaguar I-Paces. Like, let's start there.
Which, by the way, aren't even in production anymore. And
You
yeah,
know,
I think the scooter analogy is such an interesting one, right? Because you did see that period where all these VC funded scooters were just flooding the streets. They were littering Venice. They were littering the streets of San Francisco before people realized, wait a minute, these things are a giant nuisance. And you start to see things kind of come back down to earth. You do see a little bit of that here where there's sort of the VC funded norm, and then there's actually what's sustainable long term.
yeah, there's a question of like, where were those scooter companies racing to? Well, finally, we're going to get network effects, and then we're going to be like, nobody had thought it through. The Tesla model just makes so much more sense. They also have, if they choose, the entire Tesla buying population to capitalize their rollout. Like, it's so obvious to me that Tesla is going to dominate this entire space. There's some things I'm less bullish on. I don't think Optimus is going to ship anytime soon, but Tesla will not be behind in robotaxis. And if they're not behind, they win because they can make cars cheaper than everybody else. Maybe the Chinese. It's Tesla or the Chinese. There's no hope, and I think there's no future even for like GM as a company.
Yeah. And it's interesting in the call, GM really mentioned those economics. They mentioned the maintenance, having to maintain and run this fleet. It's just really challenging for a centralized fleet operator to be running maintenance and cleaning operations in multiple cities, which, to your point, is really the power of the Tesla model that you've got these customers buying in, that they're buying FSD, but they're using their own cars. And, comma, also, you're installing it on your own car. I think that really does matter quite a bit. It just lets the company focus on the problem of developing the software rather than manage this physical apparatus of operating a robo-taxi network.
Yeah, I agree. It was just so obvious, and I think there's nobody with any sort of leadership at these companies who's able to step in and say this doesn't work, right? Because who has the courage to do that? It's not Mary Barra, right? I mean, actually, this even took some courage, right? When will Waymo have the courage to come through and be like, actually, when we do the projections out on this, the more we expand, the more we lose.
Yeah, I
I
don't
don't
know
know.
if you've been following some of their recent moves, George, where, for example, they partnered with Uber to service the vehicles in Atlanta. They've partnered with another company called Move. It seems like in some of their PR releases, it's always buried under, hey, we're expanding to Miami or something. But you can really see that stress where there's a conflict between expansion and the capital needs of actually servicing, maintaining, cleaning that fleet in each of these cities. Can you guys hear him? Oh, we might have lost him. Let's see. Yoda?
Yeah, George, we're coming to the end of 2024. I was wondering if you can help us see the way you see the path from where Tesla is right now, which is, on the verge of V13, to the future of robo taxis? How do you see things roll out with the current fleet, with the new models that have purpose-built robo taxi capabilities?
I think it's too early. I think that, like, I saw the Cybercab. It's like, I don't know why you're doing that. You don't need to. We're still at least 5 years away. Still probably 10 from a true level 5 FSD. So
You also mentioned some of your skepticism about Optimus. I know you guys had played a little bit with putting comma models in the comma body. Could you dig in a little more on why you're skeptical about robotics and why you think it's still years out?
So when we started comma explicitly because we knew self-driving cars are a much easier problem than robotics, and they are. You're operating in a two-dimensional actuator space, right? Like you steer and you accelerate and brake. You're operating mostly according to a set of rules, right? Like, there's a saying in robotics. Robotics isn't whether you can pick up an apple. Robotics is what happens after you drop the apple. And it's going to be at least 5 to 10 years after level 5 driving cars are commonplace before humanoid robots are useful. Now, there may be some business model where people can build humanoid robots and get them teleop from the Philippines. Maybe. But self-driving cars are an explicitly easier problem than robotics, and everybody knows this. So all these people failed at solving self-driving cars, and people like Kyle Vogt are now raising, $150 million for his humanoid robot startup. I mean, it's clown shit.
Yeah, I mean, you've been pretty vocal about sort of this approach that I think has incinerated a lot of capital, where people just throw a ton of money at these problems, it kind of blows up, and well, now it's kind of on to the humanoids. Whereas at Comma, you've taken a much more lean, a much more bootstrapped approach, and have avoided that kind of excess.
We came out with a paper almost 10 years ago now called Learning a Driving Simulator. And what we're building today, which still hasn't shipped, is that paper. It's taken 10 years for machine learning infrastructure and machine learning technology to catch up to the point, right? You want to talk about training foundation world models. Yeah, this is what we were trying to do 10 years ago. It's only very recently. Think about this. You're never going to be able to make a foundation world model if you can't make working video synthesis models. Right? It's only now with like Sora and Hawaiian Video that these things start to exist. We're on the same waiting for the ML tech train as everybody else. But we have now years and years and years of experience. And what we have at Comma that's so valuable is we have a test suite. We have a test suite that's capable of evaluating whether a model can drive a car or not. And that actually turns out to be one of the hardest parts of the problem, because in machine learning, if you have a test you can trust, well, just search. Right? Beta lesson. Yeah.
So you talk about infrastructure catching up to that paper from 10 years ago. One of my really favorite things that you're working on is TinyGrad and TinyBox. Could you talk a little bit about the motivation for the framework and now the TinyBox you're building, and why that came to be, and what you think its place is in the world of AI infrastructure? Sorry, you're on mute.
I think we lost Hotz.
Yeah, I might be having some connection issues.
Yeah, it looked like he
So
was trying to reconnect.
I want to pose the question: what do we think about Tesla adding another 100,000 NVIDIA processors and perhaps getting into the zettaflops? Also, with Optimus now doing a hill climb essentially and being able to self-actuate and balance himself down the cliff.
Meta?
I was going to ask George some questions about the test infrastructure that he was referring to. I don't know how technical you want to get in this space.
You've got George
Yeah,
as a
we
space.
can get as
Go
technical
hard in
as
the
we need to
paint.
get. I mean, you don't have an opportunity to talk to George Hotz every day, so go for it. Assuming he can hear us.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know why the website's being flaky.
Space is a piece of shit.
Someone should really refactor the Twitter code.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't get to it on your internship, man?
A better search experience was good, but Spaces needs it.
Well, yeah, but to talk quickly about the test infrastructure. So, like, we just have different simulators, and these simulators aren't. There are some that are like contrived, kind of like GTA style simulators, but there's others that actually test on real world data. Like, we can put the car in a scenario from the real world, run, and then see how that compares to human. We also have a test called the hugging test, which has been a super valuable test, which is you put the car at different placements in a lane on an infinite highway and see how long it takes to recover to the center of the lane. This recovery pressure, turns out to be super fundamental in like the problem of imitation learning, right? Self-driving is not a supervised learning problem. You can't just take tons of human driving data and learn a model and actually use that to drive for various complicated technical reasons. I have a blog post about it. But we have tests that like, we used to have a saying on the wall on the whiteboard that said, do not test on cars, right? Because if we're testing on cars, it's because we fundamentally don't understand something. If we can't build tests that allow us to test and confirm a model is good in simulation, we're never going to be able to make progress on this problem.
Do you think this is the opposite approach that Tesla is using? Because per my understanding, and based on public comments, it looks like they're really relying on human validation.
So Tesla, from the beginning, has had something called Data Engine, which sources tons and tons of data from its fleet. So it's interesting what they've done. They don't have a really fully end-to-end solution like the one we're working on. To be fair, we haven't shipped it yet either. But they put all their planner code running in the data center and not on the car. That's what Elon talked about, how there's nothing running besides neural nets. And now they are doing basically disengagement mining. They're looking for mistakes that it makes and then effectively fine-tuning the model to not make those mistakes. This approach may work. It's not as like elegant as the one we're working on. We're working on like learning a world model and then saying in the world model, like drive a human like trajectory. But yeah, I mean, a lot of pieces have to work together for that, whereas a disengagement mining approach can get you results faster. And, that's how Elon likes to see things done. What did you get done this week?
I think the core assumption difference is that you can't simulate all the intricacies of physics, like, slipperiness of a surface, wind, things like that. How are you dealing with those discrepancies, or how are you guys seeing those discrepancies appear in the real world? Is it overblown, or is it a real thing that you're still having to deal with?
So what you do for things like that is this is a classic. It's from like the DeepMind, the OpenAI Rubik's Cube paper. You just need to make sure you've injected noise that covers the space, right? Your noise doesn't exactly have to match. Say you want to deal with something like wind, right? Like wind is just a disturbance. It's a force. It's just a force, pushed on the car, right? So as long as whatever noise your model is robust to encompasses all noise that it encounters in the real world, this is enough. So no, you don't need to simulate all of the physics. You can just, I don't know, again, who knows in the long tail? And in the long tail, we're definitely going to have some sort of disengagement mining stuff like Tesla too. But we don't want to start from a perspective of sticking tons of planner code in the data center. We want to start from like a more pure base. And then, of course, we'll fine tune on top of that based on real stuff. So I don't know. In the end, I think they converge to pretty much the same solution.
So if you're not putting a bunch of planner code in the data center, what is your reward function? What are you trying to optimize for to generate that world model?
Okay, so I'll explain it pretty technically. So we have a world model. A world model is just a state transition function. A world model says, how do you go from the state at time t to the state at time t plus 1 given an action? Now, you can have that model, and that model still doesn't tell you how to drive. right? Because you don't know what actions are good. What's your reward? So this is a trick that we came up with. The idea is basically the world model we've learned doesn't require you to put an action in. You can let the thing generate its own actions. You can drop out the actions, and those actions happen to come from a perfect human policy. Again, you can't use these to drive the car because that would be behavioral cloning. But what you can do is inject noise into the rollouts, and then the reward is, do you reconverge on the human path? Right? We put some noise, we basically shove you out of center of the lane, and then do you come back? Do you come back and then follow the human trajectory for the rest of the time? So yeah, that's kind of what it is.
Wow. That's fascinating. So when might I be able to run something like this on a Comma device?
You can right now. It's in master. So it's not in release, but it's in master. It's slightly yeah, I drove on it a few nights ago. Again, Adib, who's listening here, and Harold maybe is in here too. These are the guys working on this. It's not me, but I do know how.
How do you deal with the fact that, like, on a given trajectory, there might be multiple trajectories that are correct, so that the human path might be one way to make a left turn, but there could be multiple different ways to have made that left turn?
Yeah, so we're fortunate in driving that, like, a Gaussian noise model is kind of good. It's rare that you'll have like think about it. Think about making a left turn on the highway, right? Like you're between two lane lines. That noise is pretty much going to be Gaussian. And then for things that are multimodal, like say you have a fork in the road, the paths diverge enough that it doesn't really matter. Like it's marked wrong 50% of the time, but you still won't get a model that's going to split the difference because, that's never the right answer.
What about city driving, or do you guys not do city driving yet?
So the most advanced thing is we have a video of a drive to Taco Bell. So we do a full end-to-end drive from our office to Taco Bell. And what do you mean by city driving? We do red lights, stop signs, 90-degree turns. We can do all of those things, but I'm still convinced that 95% of the product value comes from perfect highway. I mean, what I hear from a lot of people with FSD is, yeah, you'll try it, but it's more comfortable to drive yourself. We're trying to make a product that improves the driving experience. We are not trying to get to robo-taxis at a given date. We all get to the same point, but our slogan is self-driving cars while delivering shippable intermediaries. And in order to make a good shippable intermediary, focus on the places where this is actually going to add value to the driver today. And it's not making a 90-degree turn in the city with pedestrians around. That's terrifying to be in.
Amy?
Yeah, I'm really excited to ask some questions of George Hotz. I've been telling people for more than a couple of years that I thought Comma AI was the strong number two, and no one else was even close because of the beauty of the end-to-end network that they were doing, that they were just on the right path. And now you're seeing that play out with companies like Pony AI, NVIDIA, kind of abandoning their LiDAR solution while still selling it and trying to come with an end-to-end solution themselves. One of my understandings with Tesla, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just really not like Meta is with AI, but I really try and understand it, is Carpathia had said that one of the reasons of writing the rules and the policies that they're using to train in the background is I'm trying to learn French. And if I tried to learn French without any types of lessons, it would be very difficult for me to just pick up from listening to it. And that training AI models can be the same, that without any type of building blocks to start from, it's hard for them to dial in. How do you deal with that at Comma? I think that your rule base that you were just talking about is some of it. I mean, clearly you've done it. You are already end to end. I'm just interested about how that came about.
So yeah, I mean, I think the distinction that you're going for here about the French thing is kind of like you can learn a predictive model, but you can't learn an acting model. If you listen to tons and tons of French text, you can build a very good compressive model of that French text, but that doesn't mean that you can speak French. Various sorts of things make acting a lot harder than predicting. But the way that we deal with that is in the like model distillation step that I was talking about. So first, we learn a really, really good predictor because a really, really good predictor is a prerequisite for an action model, right? Every human is very, very good at predicting what will happen, even before they ever drive a car for themselves, right? Think about it. If you've been a passenger for, say, the first 18 years of your life, you understand how cars move. But that doesn't mean you can drive one. And driving one then takes time on top of that. So that's when we do this noise injection correction procedure. It's not ideal. There's still a lot to be figured out here. We always have the Tesla option as well of doing basically disengagement mining. This is what Wave AI is doing as well. Just get tons of disengagements from your fleet, fine tune them, say, okay, this is what the model wanted to do, this is what the human actually did, be more like what the human actually did. So yeah, I think I agree with that. And, in the limit, we don't know exactly what the solution is going to be yet, but this is all moving in the right direction. And like, we're moving in the right direction because the system is getting better and simpler. Better doesn't mean you're moving in the right direction, and simpler doesn't mean you're moving in the right direction, but better and simpler together, it's hard for that to be wrong.
Yeah, it's amazing to see these, multi-billion-dollar companies like GM just burn money and now coming out in their call today saying exactly what Kama's been saying for years. We want to deliver incremental features to our customers. We want to be more capital efficient. It's just unfortunate it took them so many years to come down to it. But George, you talked a lot about your end-to-end model. Could you talk about what the training infrastructure looks like for that model today that you're shipping to customers? Are you using TinyGrad and TinyBox? Are you using some NVIDIA clusters? And just in general, what do you think are the needs in terms of compute and data to train a world-class ADAS or unsupervised model? Is it an unsurmountable challenge? Is it something that's going to cost billions of dollars in infrastructure to get done? Or are there ways to actually achieve it at even the scale of a comma?
That's an open question. So yeah, our compute cluster is about 500 GPUs. So it's not nothing. We're GPU middle class. And almost everything being installed right now is TinyBox Pros. TinyBox Pros are available for pre-order. The first ones are going to start shipping to customers this month. I got a factory over there building 25 of them right now. Like a couple doors away from where I'm sitting. So yeah, we don't know, right? If like maybe a question is kind of what animal do you think could drive a car, right? Like, do you think a mouse could drive a car?
Probably not.
You sure? What about like
Well, yeah,
properly
if you gave it a
wired up?
body,
Yeah,
it might be able to, yeah.
right? Like a mouse that learned its whole life being able to like drive a car. Like its car is the body pretty much.
It has enough neurons.
Well, I think they've actually made mice drive like tiny cars, haven't they?
I totally believe a mouse can drive a car. Okay, now how about a bee?
Plenty in it.
I mean, they exhibit some pretty complex behaviors.
They have a lot of neurons. I think if you're going by neuron count, we could probably get down to like a worm.
Oh, you think a worm? Okay. So our consensus at Comma is there's no way an ant can drive a car. I think a worm's maybe be lower than an ant. A bee could probably drive a car on a highway, and a mouse could probably drive a car in the city. So for reference, a bee is maybe something like the same size as a Comma 3. So the Comma 3 probably doesn't have enough compute to do full-scale city driving, but we have a USB port. And what we're working on right now at TinyGrad is being able to plug in a big AMD GPU right into the USB port of the Comma 3. I think the sensors can get you most of the way there. And a GPU has a modern, maybe a 5090 is similar compute power to a mouse. So yeah, I think that's what you need for inference. And then your training thing is usually like a
God damn it, Spaces team.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we lost him or if I lost audio. Thanks for saying something, Omar.
Spaces!
As soon as it gets good.
You get George back there for another, what was it, 3 weeks last
Okay, all right,
time,
he's
and just
back.
fix this?
It works better in the mobile app, yeah.
Be addicted to Twitter all the time. I think, yeah. So if I pick it off, I think that you'll need about a GPU for inference, and then I think to train you need 1,000x more. So I think like 1,000 GPUs could probably train a decent model, and then maybe you need 2 of those clusters to do 2 experiments at once. So like 2,000 GPUs, like 2,000 like 5090 H100 class GPUs.
Are you frustrated with what's available on the inference side as far as, some type of Snapdragon that can just run an incredible model natively or something like that? Or do you feel like we're pretty good where we're at in terms of what you can buy on the market?
Oh, we're good. I mean, the comma 3 and 3x, probably when we start to move into bigger models, maybe a year or two, we're just going to have you plug a gaming GPU into the device. And a gaming GPU is the cheapest, best inference flops you can get. And also, people are like, oh, well, what if this thing breaks? If it breaks, it'll fall back to the small model running on the device. You won't even notice it in 99% of scenarios. But for that last 1% of scenarios, you want the compute power of something like a 4090. To be fair, a 4090 or like a 5090 has the same compute power as a Tesla.
Yeah. So people would just kind of, put this on their dashboard or under the dashboard or something. You'd kind of hide it in the car.
Yeah, stick it under the seat or something. You have to figure out how to get like a couple, maybe 100, 200 watts to it. But yeah, no, I don't see this being a problem, and I'm quite happy with where things are. I think that the biggest problem is just software. And like, not just software, but fundamental machine learning research progress. Like, reinforcement learning doesn't work. Classical controls is way better than reinforcement learning, and it's a very open question as to why.
Yeah. So, I mean, where do you see comma in all this? You've said that you think comma is going to be the number 2. Do you think, I mean, especially as the hardware starts to get more complex, you've got a GPU. Is this something that you see going forward as something that's just sort of installed by the customer or third party? Or are you open to working with manufacturers like GM to do something more integrated? Or has that just been a road that hasn't worked for you in the past?
I mean, Kyle Vogt got his company acquired by GM, and he's recently referred to them as a bunch of dummies. So no, I'm not sure working with GM is going to work. I think that there are several Chinese OEMs right now very seriously working on open pilot ports. I am shocked that companies like Lucid and Rivian, who have the compute in their car to run open pilot, don't just run open pilot and instead ship some terrible thing. So I think working with companies like that is more possible. I think working with GM or Toyota is not possible. I think these companies are just going to die. Like, as we move to electric cars, we're going to just rip GM, rip Toyota. Maybe of the classic OEMs, it might be possible to like work with a Hyundai or something. But people always think that this like comma aftermarket thing doesn't work. The average car on the road is 12 years old. These cars, we have a 20 million person addressable market just in America. The addressable market for comma is massive. It just needs to provide more value, and that's what we're working on.
Yeah. And that is, I think, actually really important. Like, I'm a huge FSD user, but I love the fact that there's an Android. I love the fact that for the people who don't have the option of buying a brand new car or buying an electric car, that they could actually just get this and they can run it and it's open. And it's just such a contrast to everything else that's going on in the industry. And you can't, as a software developer, not like that. And I mean, in so many ways, what you're doing just goes against conventional business sense. It goes against VC culture. It goes against so much of what is just the MO of Silicon Valley. And is just kind of true to, I think, hacker culture and really the origins of the computer. So it is really exciting to see it. I think you guys have had the right approach. You have been very influential, and everybody I talk to as a comma, they just swear by the thing. It certainly seems to be better than the ADAS system on my Mercedes, on Rivian, on Lucid, and Lucid's got lidar and all this stuff, and they don't even have a system that can even match the capabilities of OpenPilot. So
The 1 year Consumer Reports made the mistake of including us. We won. We're top rated in Consumer Reports the only year they ever included us, and then they were like, we can't do that again.
why did they stop including you guys? Just pressure, or?
Yeah, probably. We don't really know. It was kind of sketchy. I think some car maker gave him a call, or someone gave him a call, or I don't know. I don't know what happened. But yeah, we were never on the list again. But the 1 year we were included on the list, we won #1, even ahead of Tesla. For various, there's a bunch of people who say they prefer comma to Tesla. Tesla is clearly more capable, but comma is a more chill experience, and depending on what you're looking for, it may be better for you. But yeah, I think I'll wrap up with one more thing about the business. The VCs. Here's the thing: we're going to make way more money than all these self-driving car companies. How much money did Cruise make? -8 billion. How much money did Argo make? -3 billion. Right? We're actually going to make maybe $1 billion. 1 billion. I think 10 would be hard in this space. I think maybe in 5 years, 10 years, we'll be moving on to robots, and at that point, maybe we can make more than $1 billion. But yeah, the VCs, the big problem in VC culture and all of this culture is that they want returns next quarter. You can't do this. I don't know how everyone forgot about this, but if you want to build a successful business, you got to build it over 10 or 20 years. People say I quit a lot of stuff. I've been doing this for 10 years. We're going to do it for 10 more. So,
Yeah, it's so true. And if you think about it, you really have made more profits than the rest of the robotaxi industry combined. Take Waymo, take Cruise. I mean, if you made $1, you're kind of coming up ahead in a sense. So it's not flashy. It's not what is going to get you covered in the news media. It's not going to generate some huge valuation figure, but it's real value to real people. It's good, honest work.
these things also are, easy come, easy go, hard come, hard go. If you build a business over 10 years, it takes 10 years to wind it down. If you popped off in the first 6 months, well, and 6 months later, you're like, oh, where'd our customers go? Well, easy come, easy go.
Well, sweet. Thanks so much, George, for joining us. It was really a pleasure talking to you. Are you going to be at the Kama holiday party?
I will be at the Kama holiday party. Are you going to be at the Kama holiday party?
Yeah, somebody emailed me and said I can come, so I'll be there tomorrow.
Cool. See you then.
Sweet. All right. Always interesting listening to George. We probably need to wrap it up here soon, but let me play a couple more questions from the call before we close out.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next caller is Sharice Patel with Wolfe Research.
Hey, thanks so much for taking my question. I'm just curious how you would think about the process for developing full autonomy. And I guess why I'm asking is there are some approaches that other automakers are taking, which are actually quite capital intensive, requiring significant purchases of GPUs and harvesting of data for AI training. So, but there are other approaches that may be more capital light. So I'm just trying to understand how you think about that path to autonomy and what would be some of the processes you would deploy.
Well, as we've said, we are committed to continuing to improve Super Cruise to advance to, true L3, L3 plus. And we believe ultimately L4 technology is still important from a personal autonomy perspective. And so as we do that, we will look at ways to be efficient doing that. Again, as I've mentioned already, leveraging what's already been done at Cruise, I think is going to be an important part of it. There's also other opportunities I think that we would have potentially working with others as we go.
Man, I can't even listen to this woman. um, after talking to George Hotz. There's a CEO who just gives it to you straight, who actually knows what he's talking about on a deep technical level. And then here's these guys trying to give a bunch of marketing and PR speak to cover up a decision that's so bad. Even the CEO of the company they acquired is calling them dummies. Okay. So, hey, we're going to shut down Cruise to save money. We're going to move to an end to end foundation model approach. Well, guess what? That costs billions of dollars too. So, they're going to fail in this as well. I think that's pretty obvious. Let's see if there was anything else interesting. I don't know. This all looks pretty boring. I don't think I can top, George Hotz popping in here and talking to us. So we'll just have to end the space there. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you all. And yeah, it's a really exciting time in autonomy. I'm hopeful that V13 gets out to everybody for the holidays pretty soon, and people can try it, because I think people's expectations are shifting in a big way for this tech. And once people can just really experience it for themselves with V13 in their own car, no video can match that. So thanks everyone for coming, and we'll be back with more spaces some other time. And oh, our sponsor, Joa, up at the top. Go buy something from Joa. Use the code HOMEMARS. If you don't buy anything, then they're going to say, what the hell? I paid this asshole $1,000 to sponsor him, and I made back $12. So go use the code HOMEMARS, get 5% off. You need a holiday gift for yourself, for your Tesla friends, for your family. Go get something from Joa, and then I won't look like an idiot. Take care, everyone. All right, moving on, although this is very exciting. If there's anything more, feel free to add. But I wanted to bring Jeff in to talk about this story about what we're seeing in the Chinese EV market. I mean, the Chinese EV market, most competitive EV market in the world. In the past few years, we've heard narratives that, these companies are all going to mop the floor with Tesla. They're going to be shipping into Europe. And we're really seeing ballooning supplier payments. The number of days it's taking for many of these Chinese auto brands to pay their suppliers has increased substantially since last year, whereas for Tesla, it's actually decreased. I know you shared some of these thoughts with your subscribers and on X, Jeff, but could you just give some commentary on this story and what you think about it?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's pretty important. I think it's very important, actually. And I was alerted to this. My Ray in China pinged out some information. There was some letters from suppliers to various OEMs, and just for everybody on the call, I do have a background in supply chain, 2 decades, and worked and led in kind of this C-level roles and leading supply chain at multiple Fortune 100 companies. So I try to break this down in terms of like what this means. But what at a high level, the summary is the days payable outstanding, which is how, is the equation is basically your outstanding payments due to suppliers divided by your COGS times whatever days are in that term. If you're trying to do it on an annual basis, you'd multiply it by 365. And in the US, if you're looking at like, Tesla in the US or Ford, they're between like, 55, 60 days in terms of days payable outstanding. And even GM's creeped up a little bit. They're at 73 days. Toyota, on the other hand, is in the 40s. So and Toyota is a very good supply chain. Now, when you go over to China, what I was alerted to, and I saw some of this data, and then Bloomberg has done a couple of articles this year, like nobody's picked it up. But what's happened over the last 3 years is China has ramped up their auto market. There's two things going on. One is they're structurally higher in days payable outstanding. So even 2 or 3 years ago, they were in the high 100 days, low 200 days, and you have nothing imploded. Everybody's throwing kind of flowers over the China EV makers. You can't do no wrong and so forth. So problem number one is it's structurally higher. Now it's being subsidized by the Chinese government, but you can't get around this. Like the reason the reason this is structurally higher is because they need the cash to run their business and they can't pay suppliers. So the Chinese government comes in, they step in and they subsidize some of this activity so these suppliers don't go under. Because what they're trying to do is China's turned into the number one exporter of EVs, and they're just
Yeah,
trying
I
to
mean,
grow this auto
the Bloomberg
business.
story had like 280 days to pay some of
So
these
yeah,
suppliers. How do you survive as a supplier with that kind of backlog?
yeah. So what it is it's the aggregate. It's all the outstanding payables that they have divided by their cost of goods sold. So what's good about it is that it's kind of the metric kind of checks yourself in terms of like how are you running your company in 30 seconds or less. What you're trying to do from a supply chain perspective is you're trying to localize your supply base. You're trying to decrease your network latency, meaning the number of days it takes you to get parts or weeks to get parts in, how long it takes you to build your product, and how long it takes you to get to your end consumer. That's your whole end to end network. And great companies focus on how do you reduce that time. Tesla is actually the best at this I've ever seen. Toyota is behind them. And then there's a huge gap. So, with that backdrop, what we're seeing in China is they've creeped up. There's two issues. One is they're structurally higher. Two is they've creeped up. Neo has gone up to almost 300 days so basically 10 months of payables outstanding. So they're basically not paying suppliers so they can have enough cash to run their business, to invest in R&D, to keep the lights on. But this is not structurally sound. This can't go on forever in perpetuity. Now, could there be some sort of bailout? Could there be something that comes through? And are they actively being bailed out now? Yeah, China actually has a structural system in place to to fund certain activities that they feel are critical, to the government, to employment, and so forth. But I think that the key takeaway here is the growth over 3 years in payables outstanding is huge. Just go to my Twitter timeline. I know Omar posted something too as well. The growth is the problem. Like, where does this stop? And Tesla, on the other hand, they've actually shrunk. So Tesla's at about 120. They shrunk it down to close to 100 days payable outstanding in China. And Li Auto's is also shrunk from like 180 to 160. Everybody else is in the 200s, growing to 300. BYD is at 275 days. So the point is, it's taking them longer and longer to pay their suppliers. At some point, this breaks. So what is the DPO or payment terms are one of the top five things you negotiate in a supplier contract. It's not all about the piece part. It's about inventory terms. It's about who holds the inventory. It's about indemnification. There's all these different terms in a supplier contract. Price is just one thing. You're really trying to get all these other terms nailed. And what the holy grail is what you want payment terms with your supplier that are at a point where they're long enough, but they're good enough for them. But you can actually build and get their parts in, build and ship your product, sell your product, and get the cash from your customer before you have to pay your suppliers. That's the holy grail. That's what you're trying to get to. That's what Tesla, that's why Tesla threw off 2.7. There's other reasons, but one of the reasons Tesla is able to throw off cash and be in this good cash position is they're really good at this. And so Tesla is actually structurally higher in China. China runs higher, like we just said, but Tesla's only at 100 days. These other companies are three times that. So the takeaways are it's structurally higher, but it's growing. And I don't know how long this can grow. Like, I don't know where this can go to. But at some point, these suppliers are going to be like, look, like I need to get paid to keep the lights on, and I can't, I don't know how long this whole thing can be subsidized. It's kind of like the Chinese housing market. At some point, it could be on the brink default. So do I think is somebody going out of business tomorrow? If it's anybody, it's going to be Neo. But in terms of like, if somebody, I'm not saying people are going out of business tomorrow. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you have to keep an eye on this. This is not structurally sound. This is not good. And this is like when you pull the covers back and everybody wants to talk about like how many cars they're shipping. We have no idea what the channel inventory is in China. We have no idea. But this DPO data, we don't even know how well this is reported, but this is coming off of balance sheets. We don't know how good it is, but it's relative and it's growing. I think it's a huge problem.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And, when I think about this as kind of a Tesla investor, I think about really this sort of multi-year downtrend in Tesla stock that's really been driven by pricing pressure due to a glut of EVs entering the market. And, Elon calls it the EV hangover. We had kind of this EV party. There was market euphoria as all these EVs were selling at 30% margins during the auto shortage. And then now you've got a situation where Tesla's margins have been under pressure. Growth has been under pressure in terms of volume growth. And that has really, I think, weighed on Tesla as a stock. But, I think the big question for the market is this sort of the new normal? Is this what we can expect to see going forward with their margins continuing to be under pressure? Or is there actually going to be some alleviation of pressure because these brands, whether it's sort of Rivian facing capital constraints or these Chinese automakers getting stretched with their suppliers, are going to have to kind of reset to a new normal that will actually give Tesla more pricing power in the market? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how this. y- I don't know how this improves because I think one of the ways this improves is a bunch of them go under, and when a bunch of them go under and the supply goes down, then what would happen, I think a lot of this is actually channel inventory driven, meaning there's too much stuff out there to buy. It takes too long to sell. If they can't sell it, they can't get cash from their customers. They can't get cash from their customers, they can't pay their suppliers. And then they're also trying to do too many things. Like each of these China OEMs have just way too many models. Yeah, everybody kind of looks at like the volume that BYD is shipping, but their EV, they take some 21 different models to produce the EV volume that Tesla does in 5 models. Now that's very powerful when you're going out to the supply base and you're negotiating. You take Tesla volume and you divide it into 5 models, and even in those 5 models, there's tremendous reuse inside of those models. So what happens is if you're a supplier of a Tesla part, you're going to get maybe the biggest numerical volume award that you can get in the auto industry is getting an award on the Tesla Model Y. I mean, that's just a fact. So I think the way this comes to a head is I think a bunch of them have to go under. They got to get the supply under control. And I mean, if anybody in China has any info on channel inventory and how that's faring, there's any good sources, I think that would be helpful. We're getting some really good data here in the US that shows that, there's some things that are under strain. So right now in the US, what's happening is channel inventory is starting to balloon again, but you still have these major OEMs, they're still paying their suppliers. So GM's at 73 days, Ford's at 55 days. Tesla's, 58 to 60 days. So suppliers are still getting paid. That's a good sign. What's happening in the China auto market with this growth of 20, 30, 50 days happening annually, that is in depth, that signifies like there's a structural problem of too much supply, too much channel inventory, not enough sales, and then everything's getting extended out. So then they can't go out and they're also trying to do too many things at once, probably, and they don't have the cash to pay their suppliers. By the way, I don't know if any Tesla, I'm sure there's Tesla Q people listening to this anonymously. I never hear any of them talk about this, by the way, which is bizarre. I mean, this if you're if you say you're an auto analyst and you're tracking the auto industry and you're like, you're gloating over like what's happening in China, like, this is like a level 2 derivative thing you would look at, just a basic analysis of an auto company. What's their inventory? What's their balance sheet inventory? And are they paying their suppliers? This is a sickness. This is the patient is sick here. This is a real problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it was kind of obvious to those who were paying attention that a lot of the pricing we were seeing was ultimately unsustainable. I think China and the Chinese auto market's a really massive opportunity for Tesla. You look at their dominance today, and you look at the new Model Y that we know is coming. You look at the new, more affordable models. You look at the launch of FSD in 2025. I think there's really room for significant growth, especially as you see these other companies sort of uh, face some of these challenges. Given your experience working with suppliers, could you speak to the relationship between the suppliers and Tesla when you've got a situation like this, and um, how that might impact the relationship with suppliers between Tesla and their suppliers as well as their peers?
I've talked about this, and I talk about it in on podcasts and subscribers, and I talk to I know a lot of the suppliers. I don't have any material information at all. I'm just more just in general. Supply. I mean, Tesla's a tough OEM, but they are good to their suppliers. It is like a win-win type relationship. They're not getting stuck with inventory at the end of the quarter. There's no games like that. So in a situation like this, suppliers talk. First off, they know themselves. I'm like, if I'm doing business with BYD and NEO and they're not fucking paying me, that's a serious fucking problem. And in terms of them, like, taking on the next project from those companies, like, why am I gonna put my R&D resources to develop this next part, and you're not paying me on the stuff you're taking right now? So it has a huge impact. Tesla is literally the shortest number of outstanding payment days is in China is with Tesla. So if you're a supplier, you want the Tesla business, again, for those two key reasons. One is they're paying you, and two is if you get an award on the Model Y or the Model 3, quite frankly, you're going to get a highest volume award for the least amount of ROIC, basically the least amount of invested capital at your factory or your supplier. You invest on making one part for the Model Y, you're going to get the most volume and the most return from it. So suppliers love Tesla. By the way, one of the things I see happening out of this is, number one, I think and Tesla's been trying to do this, and I think it's going to get a little bit sticky with what's happening in Mexico and then even the U.S. But they try to globalize. They look at their best suppliers in each region, and if they're really good suppliers, like they either have really good technology, really good cost, they're really good at delivery, they try to give those suppliers the opportunity to quote unquote globalize. And what that means is, like, let's say you're supplying the Berlin factory right now, and like your cost structure is really good, and you want to grow. Well, Tesla may give that supplier the opportunity to go bid on business in the US, bid on business in China, and then they can go set up an operation right by the Tesla factory in those other countries, and then they can grow their company. There's some companies that started working with Tesla in Shanghai, for example, that have grown into global, suppliers in the auto industry. And that's what China is trying to do. So not to like muddy this up even further, but I think these tariff conversations, I think the I think this is going to get, I think it's going to get vicious because of what is happening right now domestically in China with what I just told you with days payable outstanding. These suppliers are like, it's almost like they're trapped in like, and they're just trying to get out. And if they can go get business in Western Europe, they can go get business in Central America, where in the US, structurally, the payment terms are a lot faster, and then you can start getting paid and you can start funding your business, even back home. So I think the stakes on the tariff conversations are at a completely different level than where they were 4 to 6 years ago.
Yeah, totally agree. And this is really not well understood by most people. You explain it pretty well. I mean, Tesla is just hell bent on growth, right? they're not accepting a down year for 2024. They're pulling out all the stops. They're pulling out the lease buyouts to get that growth. And, when suppliers know this is a company that's going to continue to grow, they're going to continue to make volume growth a focus. That's the company you want to work with more than anything else. So
Yeah.
if you got any questions for Jeff or anyone else on the speaker board, hit the request to speak. You can raise your hand. This space is brought to you by the Matter Key. It's pinned up on my profile. You can plug this dash cam drive into your USB drive, pull the footage wirelessly to your phone. It connects to your Tesla account. It tracks FSD data. Great product. Thank you to them for sponsoring. We're also sponsored by Chat LLM Teams for Abacus AI. $10 a month per employee for everyone in your company. Get access to every major LLM, Grok, ChatGPT, Gemini, all of them, Alama, all in one place with some really great features. And also by let's see, who's the other one? Oh yeah, Joa. Joa makes the best Tesla accessories. You all know Joa, Jowua. Use the code WHOLEMARS at checkout and get, I think, 5% off your order. Eddie?
Hey, Jeff, could you talk about the interest rate for each of these terms? Usually, I think you're talking about accounts payable, and usually when you go longer out, you have higher interest rate. Is that how it works in China too? And if it goes out that far, what's the interest rate difference between, um, like 10 months away from, 30 days?
I mean, it would be like contract. There'd be there could be some sort of penalty, in the contract for there's interest due if you go beyond certain days payable. Then they try to go negotiate all that stuff away. See, if you're not structurally sound, if you're not
But
buying
I need it
parts,
first.
sorry,
Oh, sorry about that.
I was just going to say, if you're not structurally sound in your supply chain, where you're buying parts when you say you're going to buy parts, building cars when you're saying you're going to build cars, selling cars on the schedule you're saying you're going to sell them on, then things get kinked up. And when things get kinked up, you've ordered the wrong material for the wrong product. Your balance sheet inventory, so what's in your factory four walls, goes up, and then you run into these problems. And so what companies tend to do is at the end of when they take a particular model or a part end of life with a supplier, they try to go in and negotiate, and they try to say, hey, look, I know I stuck you with like 14 million of excess material, but I'm going to give you the follow-on version of this vehicle. I'm going to give you the follow-on part. I'm going to give you greater share. I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And it's just promises stacked on promises. But that's where this multi-year data comes in, this DPO data. It's showing that it's not like this, like 2023 was a blip year and 2024 is like it's been going up steadily. Like it's like structurally unsound. And again, I know if you want to take the other side of this, if someone wants to take the other side of it, it's fine. By the way, I get it. They have longer they have longer accounts payable in China. I get it. No one's gonna like tell me like, oh, did you know that it's longer? I know that. I've actually run a supply chain in
What's
China for
typical in the US versus China for
so
automotive?
in the auto industry, the typical US is 55 to 60, and in China, it should be closer to 100. And the only reason it's higher, structurally higher in China, is that they have this entity that's literally going in and funding these suppliers at multiple levels. It's not like it's like they're on their own and like making all these monies. You can say, well, in the
You're talking
US,
about
there's
like government support for these suppliers.
structured
Hmm.
government support at like multiple levels. So it's wild. But yeah, I mean, these guys are in the various penalties on their contracts. Who knows? I mean, the way that contracts are enforced is different by region. And it's not to say that China's not sophisticated, but what they'll do is they'll try and negotiate it, between generations of product. But again, if you're structurally unsound, it's a problem. Whereas these suppliers look over at Tesla and be like, hey, these guys only have 4 or 5 models. They're producing all this volume. And, if I get an award on this is beautiful for Tesla because in general, for each part, they either have 2 or 3 suppliers. And what you have in that situation is kind of called like a 2+1 approach where you would give like each supplier like the top two like 45 each, and then you have some contender at the bottom where you give them 10%, something on that line. And what you do is that third supplier is hungry and they're trying to go from 10% share to 45% share. So they try to get more efficient in their factory, they try to cut their costs, they try to do better in quality, and then they try to jump in. So it you have this virtuous cycle that's created, but it's a positive thing with Tesla because when they ask for the parts, they take the parts, and there's steady growth with them. There's no major surprises. I'm not saying Tesla's perfect because they're not, but man, if relative to the rest of the auto industry, they're pretty good. Now, the second one, and I'll shut up here, is Li Auto. Li Auto's actually run quite well. Um, and they're one of the founders is one of my former coworkers. And his name's Shan Yan, and he is brilliant from a supply chain perspective. He has the Lenovo background. He's brilliant, and this I think is one of the reasons like they're not fucking around with days payable. They're in pretty good shape, and they're a good company. So anyway, it's interesting that just because these guys can like start up a company, make cars, and ship them, doesn't mean that they're really good at running a business. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks so much. That's really great color. Uh, Jesus?
Jeff, what's your take on the imminent collapse of Nissan, the news today?
I wish I could hear Jesus better.
He was
Yeah,
asking about
you need to
Nissan.
tune in, Jeff.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, he was asking about Nissan. There was some news today that Nissan might be facing, 12 to 18 months. Maybe they could be gone or something.
I think a lot of automakers are in serious trouble. Here's my advice. If you want to study this a little bit further, I have not looked at Nissan specifically, but I can. What I am doing is even the ones that are in pretty good shape, they're starting to get stretched. Look at their balance sheet inventory, look at their sales and channel, and then look at their channel inventory and look at all those three things together. And when you look at those things and then look at their days payable outstanding, and then when you look at those things, all like those four metrics together, you get a pretty good mosaic about like how are they doing like from a health perspective. One of the things I've noticed with Toyota, for example, is they've been steadily growing their balance sheet inventory as a percent of sales, you know, pretty high. It's not bad. Like they're not in the danger zone, but it's growing. So you can see like the auto industry is really getting stressed. Western Europe, they're really getting stressed. I mean, I think there are several you're seeing them. They're laying people off. They're closing factories. If you want to go one metric deeper, go find the utilization data of some of their factories. I mean, a good utilization rate is 70 to 80% is the floor, and you're going to find a lot of these factories are in the 30s, 40s, 20s, and that is the sign that that factory is sick. And if something doesn't change, that factory needs to get shut down because all those fixed costs have to be absorbed. If you're only using it 20% of the time, you're taking those fixed costs and you're putting them on top of a smaller number of units. So then each car gets a bigger fixed cost weighting. So, we'll see. It's kind of a mixed bag, but don't be fooled by you see increasing unit growth or you see, gross margins one quarter. You wouldn't want to look at like a steady trend. And what I got excited about, like in the last Tesla quarter, was they grew production 15%, but their balance sheet inventory in their factories was the same from Q2 to Q3. So they grew production, they brought more parts in, they made more cars, they shipped them out of the factory, but they didn't grow their balance sheet inventory. And then their channel inventory, I mean, went from 18 to 19 days. That's nothing. So they basically kept their channel inventory. So Tesla, those metrics from kind of a balance sheet health, from a cash conversion, those are very healthy metrics in Q3. Whereas I don't see some of the, and we don't even know if the data is any good, but the data we are getting is pretty troublesome on some of these China automakers. And again, I'm not here saying they're going out of business tomorrow. But if you ask me, like, is one, I mean, Neo looks pretty bad. But what I'm saying is like this is not healthy. It can't go on for much longer, and it's not structurally sound. And by the way, this is why they're fighting to go global as quickly as they are.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible just zooming out and looking where we are with Tesla right now. On one hand, you've got the energy business posting record numbers. We have rumors that the Shanghai Megapack factory will be finishing up construction in December. We're going to start to see some shipments out of there. I think long term, it'll probably account for more than 50% of Tesla Megapack volume. I think obviously the unit economics will be more favorable than California. At the same time, you're seeing in the EV business much greater stability than we've seen in the past few years with this glut of money losing competition, often state subsidized, often, VC subsidized, just sort of putting pricing pressure on Tesla's products. And then at the same time, here we are talking about FSD 13, Ashok tweeting about that, the rollout, and it really feels like while others are just struggling to tread water, Tesla is not only growing the auto business, looking for a record quarter this quarter, but really kind of trying to take it to the next level in their business plan with FSD. It's interesting as we look at, for example, the release of Auto Park and actually Smart Summon in Europe and the Middle East. I wonder if we could see another round of revenue recognition similar to what we saw in the third quarter related to the release of those items in Europe and the Middle East and presumably China, as well as additional FSD features being released in the United States, like FSD 13. I don't know if they gave any color on the call, but would you expect to see sort of a similar revenue recognition, less, or do you think that was more of a one-time event?
I mean, the Cybertruck, that first kind of big update on the Cybertruck getting FSD. I think that portion of it may be one time. We don't know exactly what that contribution was, but I just see FSD usage. It has to be growing. We don't know the real numbers on the outside. We know that Tesla at one point reported about 23% of users, have downloaded and are either on the subscription or bought it outright. But that could change and fluctuate. But my own experience is I used, last year this time I was on V11. I probably used FSD, 10 to 30% of the time for my drives. The rest of the time I would just take over and drive. And now it's the inverse of that. It's basically 90% of my drives are on FSD. And the reason is it works better. So I'd have to think that th- and this is what I think a lot of analysts are missing is they try to make everything a one-time thing. And this it looks like Tesla's escaping from being a hardware, even though they're really good at it, their sources of revenue are growing, and these sources of revenue are more permanent than the car hardware business is. So I just see them releasing more features and recognizing more revenue, and I see more people using FSD. And at some point, they'll report those metrics the way they want to report them. I think when services is a much higher percent of the business, I think they will start reporting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be interesting to see if they break that out any further in the Q4 call, other than the stats they've been providing. So yeah, we've got about 45 minutes left. We'll spend the rest talking about FSD. If you have any questions about FSD, if you want to share any experiences, what you're hoping for with V13, anything related to the unsupervised rollout, Waymo, hit the request to speak button and raise your hand. There was this little bit of a news story about Waymo in Phoenix that I'll play for you guys here. That was kind of interesting. Just a few minutes long.
I'm going to drop down too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming, Jeff. Really appreciate all your
Yep.
color on these items.
There are growing concerns about how There are growing concerns about how humans and robots are sharing the road. Waymo had 2 voluntary recalls this year after crashes in the Phoenix area, and the AI car company faces a massive auto safety investigation by the federal government. For some, climbing into the backseat of a Waymo is venturing into the future. Vroom, vroom, vroom. For others,
Okay, actually, this is just on my page. You guys can watch it yourself. But, the news story is basically talking about some of these crashes, some of these issues they're seeing. A lot of people don't really know that 75% of their driving is in Phoenix, and that, 75% of their miles are still human driven. So I think the market's in for a big surprise on FSD in the coming uh, months in 2025. Really, it's going to become clear to pretty much everybody, I think, that they have the most advanced self-driving system in the world. And I just recorded some videos with Gally. They came away thinking the same thing. They said, we put them head to head. I think Tesla won on this. So yeah, anything you guys are interested with FSD 13, issues you're seeing, if it's working for you. I know a lot of people have reported good results. I've also heard some people continue to report issues, issues with weather, issues with snow in particular. I think that it's kind of interesting. It seems to have almost stepped back a little bit with the end to end on some of this inclement weather stuff, particularly, bad snow. I think the V11 stack was more tuned towards snow. They'd had kind of years to do that. Whereas with the new end to end process, they maybe have to kind of start over again, putting some of those winter driving clips in. And this is, of course, the first winter since the launch of V12. So hopefully we see some point releases, maybe V13 that improve on that. But a lot of people are reporting great experiences. A lot of people also still reporting different issues. Let's go to Lincoln first.
So, I didn't. Do they actually want? Do they want snow data? Because I haven't been using it much in the snow. I just figured it's not ready for that yet, But I did try it or 2 nights ago for the first time in a while, and it did okay until it didn't because I couldn't see the lines. But yeah, I don't know. I thought if they needed that, they would like encourage it, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, I've never really driven it much in the snow. It doesn't snow here in California, but you can use it whenever you think it's appropriate. If it looks like it's working fine, then you can use it. You definitely want to be extra cautious in snow or even heavy rain. Be extra alert. There are some situations, really bad snow or really bad rain, where it just might not work that well at all. So you kind of just have to use your best judgment, but you also don't really have to worry about sending them data. They'll gather the data they need, whether you're driving manually or whether you're on FSD. So,
I guess
you,
they could look at where it's snowing and see who was using their FSD too. I mean, there's plenty of ways to do this. Um,
well, I
I
mean,
did.
there's tons of Teslas driving in the snow, so they've got tons of data. And they actually have a testing facility in New Zealand. So they do winter testing all year round. Even in summer, they're testing for snowy conditions in New Zealand. So, yeah, this is definitely something they're working on. It doesn't need to only work in the sun. I mean, if they could get it to even work in the sun perfectly, that'd be great. But we do need to handle bad weather. We need to handle snow. We need to handle rain. We need to handle fog. And it can do okay with some of that stuff. But I think definitely as we get into the winter months here, some people are seeing sort of new issues. And this is also important to track. A lot of people will say, oh, well, look at this community tracker spreadsheet. It's actually going down. That means the software is getting worse. But they fail to control for variables like weather, different people's driving patterns, essentially noise in the data. That, graph you see doesn't actually give you a one-to-one look at the software's performance. There's all kinds of other factors that are in there, weather, traffic, holiday traffic, that type of stuff. The same exact software, whether it's better and worse, if you tried to use it when it's snowy on Thanksgiving weekend when everyone's driving and the streets are crowded, compared to, on a sunny summer day, it's probably going to do much better. And that doesn't necessarily mean the software got worse. The world actually got worse around it, right? Um, so looking at this data is actually very complex and very nuanced. And it's funny to watch investors try and figure out how to process it. And, often people make a lot of sort of elementary statistical errors in trying to evaluate the performance and what people are saying. Yoda?
Yeah, thanks. Maybe to help bring this sort of 5x improvement to life, Omar, what would be some specific improvements that you're hoping to see with V13?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way of like sort of looking at it as miles per intervention is kind of um, obfuscating in some ways because it's not just like this treadmill that you have to run down, right? And okay, well, now it's 5, now it's 10, we got it to 50, we got it to 100. The way I really like to think about it is like things that it has to do are tasks. So if you think about like stopping and not hitting the car in front of you, it's 99.99999% on that, right? And you look at traffic lights, it's probably, 99.9 on traffic lights, which is to say maybe 1 out of every 1,000 times it makes a mistake and reads the traffic light wrong. So you really want to look at these specific issues. So let's say you've got a build and it's got an issue where it doesn't stop at stop signs, but other than that, it's perfect. And let's say there's a stop sign an average of every, you know, 10 miles in your neighborhood, right? So you could be driving around, seeing intersections, traffic lights, turns, it's all working perfectly. Then you encounter a stop sign whenever you happen to, let's say, 10 miles or whatever, and then you've got an intervention. And then you might say, okay, well, it's 10 miles between interventions because it's not stopping at these stop signs. But then let's say that they fixed the stop sign issue, it's now stopping, or even that they doubled or tripled performance on stop signs. And the next issue is, a truck that's turned over or something. And that only happens once every 10,000 miles or something like that. Well, now you've kind of gone from, 1 to 10,000. And it's not really just like, okay, we have to train and then the number went up a little bit. It's really as we make the model more intelligent, it can just handle more and more of these things on its own, right? So as it becomes more intelligent, these situations that trip it up just become something that's more and more challenging or more and more rare to find. So what I really want to see, what I'm really excited about for testing is just the reverse. I mean, this is a big category of issues. It's hard to find something that makes the system stop, but one of them is if it needs to reverse, it just is not allowed to reverse. Um, it's going to be doing 3-point turns, pulling out of parking spots, things like that. This adds a whole new surface area for things that can go wrong, right? Because there was no reverse before, so it's not going to mess up reversing. But now you have to look and see, okay, is it going to maybe back up into a car behind me or something, right? So that I think is going to be both good and interesting in terms of seeing how it performs. Um, but yeah, just the general intelligence, the audio processing. Honestly, it's kind of hard to find an issue that stumps it these days. So I'm not really sure what to expect with V13, but I
Yeah.
guess we'll find out very soon.
And from a developer perspective, for them to skip for Ashok to skip 12.6.9, the holy grail, and to go straight to V13 must mean it's a bit of a step change, right?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they're calling it V13 says we think this is our biggest update since V12. And I mean, those are big shoes to fill. We all remember the V11 to V12 jump. That was the moment for a lot of people where FSD went from being a joke to a real product. So I think, bumping the number again, this isn't just any ordinary release. This is something quite significant. Tessa Lee?
Hey, so yeah, I used I have the latest one to 12.5.6.3, and I do ride sharing with it. I've been using it for 2 years, like the FSD, and I use it basically to test my investment thesis. And this latest one really made me confident that it's just those little things that you're talking about, like the reversing or parking lot, things like that, that we know aren't even in this software. The rest of it is like almost solved. Like there's a few issues here and there, but for the most of it, I could really let go when especially when I do Uber, I can focus more on the rider and explain about it if they have questions about it. But I've been using it for every single Uber ride now, and I just use it to go from, and I live in San Diego, so my weather is nice. So I drove it all the way to the LA Auto Show, and for a couple little things on the highway, but other than that, it was in there the whole time, and I didn't even think about it. Like I had just had a conversation with my friend about things, and so V13, if it has all those little things, the reversing and everything, I think it really could be a solid product, and I'm really excited about it. And I want to thank you, Omar, because you did show it to me years ago, 3 years ago, I think now. You came down to San Diego and you said, "Hey, does anybody want a ride?" And I immediately messaged you, and I'm very thankful for that. That's awesome. This is a
Yeah, back before it was
revolutionary.
available.
Yeah, this is a
Yeah,
revolutionary product.
I,
Thank
yeah.
you.
I've also done some rideshare testing lately. I did some last night, and it is incredible how it just does the whole thing. But that is probably going to be the most exciting aspect of V13. I mean, V13 is what we wrote in the 1010 event, right? Ashok says everything that an unsupervised system needs to do, we're going to implement in V13. So no more, okay, well, just ask the user to take over or whatever. They're looking at even things like the cameras and making sure they're clean. Like they're really getting into the long tail of that. But really, getting truly feature complete after all these years means you could go the entire day without driving. FSD can drive you from LA to San Diego, which is like a 2-hour drive, but you're probably going to have to pull out of the parking spot yourself. And when you get to the destination, you're going to have to go park yourself. So it's like 99% handled for you. But then there is that little piece at the start and the end that reminds you that, yeah, I'm still in a car that I'm driving myself. With 13, that's going to change. It'll just be, I mean, end to end, right? Not end to end in terms of the model, but end to end in terms of you actually don't need to touch the steering wheel. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, I've also driven my car from San Diego to Detroit because I'm originally from Detroit, and I've done that 4 times now in my Tesla Model Y. And when the minute it goes unsupervised, I'm leaving San Diego to go visit my parents, my family in Detroit. The second I get it, and then when my car is a lease now, a new Model 3, I leased it, and now they have this lease thing where you could buy it. So I'm like, oh my God, I could put as many miles on in this car as I want because I was really cautious about the miles. Like, I don't care now. I could buy it and just drive as much as I want. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yoshi?
Hey, hello, Omar. Yeah, like if I had a wish list for, the future version V13, I'm driving a Model Y with hardware 3. Well, I'm not like a super driver, road tripper, or anything like that. It's more urban, errands that I do. But there are two silly things. As you mentioned, it is these scenarios where you know, once in a while we see these mistakes. I clearly understand that miles driven should not be the metric at this point because I have so many miles, like 90% of the time, I have like full confidence, right, on the with FSD. But it is, for example, in my case, the two scenarios. One of them is in certain intersections where there is a mandatory turn, either left or right. For some strange reason, sometimes it takes that lane, and I have to intervene, disengage it, and just simply, stay in my own lane. That's one. And then the other one, I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but it is obviously emergency vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks. And the car, it only once happened that I had a car in front of me and it stopped. And then after the fire truck, passed, all the cars started running. And so that was amazing, but it only happened once. And I don't know if it actually stopped because of the car in front of me. So those are the two things that I think that if it solves it for my little commute, my daily errands, it would be like 99, really, as you were saying, like 99.9 something that will be solved. Like at least for I live in the Vancouver area in Canada. And then one last little thing, and this started happening a few weeks ago, very strange. There is a specific intersection where the car would actually fold the mirror, actually the only the left, the driver's side mirror. It would fold it for whatever the reason when I'm crossing that intersection, and it didn't do it before. So yeah, those are my comments.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everybody's talking about miles per intervention, but it's such a weird metric because you have to ask what kind of miles and what kind of interventions. Let's say I took my car and I put it on a racetrack and I had it drive around the racetrack for 10,000 miles and there were no interventions. Wow, okay. 10,000 miles per intervention. Except not really because there was nothing on that racetrack. It was just driving in circles, right? Similarly, if you
That's
have
exactly it.
yeah, similarly if you have one intervention per, 100 miles, what kind of intervention are we talking? Are we talking, there's a group full of kids and it almost ran them over? Or are we talking like it was waiting a little too long and would have gone 1 second later, but the driver, pushed the accelerator? So, really, like the way I think about it is every drive is a series of maneuvers, right? So, drive straight for 5 miles, make a right turn, make a lane change to the left. And what you need to do is actually take each of these maneuvers has a probability of success, right? So you can say, 99.9% of the time it's succeeding in making a right turn. 99 point whatever percent of the time it's succeeding in making a left turn. Maybe, this percentage of the time it's reading the traffic light wrong or whatever. So you have to take all the
Exactly.
maneuvers and multiply the probabilities essentially. And it can be very different, right? So if you happen to be lucky, right? Let's say you have a path from home to work and there's no issues. You're going to be tweeting, "Wow, this is great," right? At the same time, let's say you have an issue, you live in a gated community and it is having problems getting out of that gate. Every single drive you do, you're going to have an intervention because it doesn't handle that gate. So it's always incredible when there's an update and it handles that one issue that you care about, and then boom, it's just
Yeah, and
ha-
it solves it. Exactly. So
Mhm.
every time I'm in those intersections or there's an emergency vehicle coming, I know I put attention and I'm ready to intervene because I know maybe it only is succeeding 50% of the time. But in all the other streets, roads, other easy intersections, I feel 100% confident, like super confident. So yeah, as you said, it's just solving those scenarios that I think V13 and future versions are going to start ironing out. Thank you, Omar.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Scott.
Yeah, I'm super excited for the FSD 13. Being able to go somewhere and have it drop me off and watch everybody stare at my car drive itself to a parking spot is going to be the cherry on the top. So super excited about that. You said something earlier that I actually thought of myself. Normally you and some of the other early access teams, Dirty Tesla, some of the others, they always get the builds first. And has there ever been a time when they pushed it out, to more than just early access? I know the Cybertruck, when they released that, it went really fast, but that's one model. They're all the same build. I could see how it'd be easier for them, testing wise, but with the sexy brands, there's multiple cars, different even though they're the same ECU hardware for, there's still some differences. But, I mean, do you think there's actually a chance that they could maybe do that?
Um, I mean, I wouldn't expect it. We've usually seen it go out to early access first. Now, it's possible they were just testing this extensively internally, and they are going to just roll it out wide. I mean, that's what they said in their post, but I would probably expect it'll take maybe a few weeks to roll out. Probably by Christmas time, by the holiday update, it'll be out to everybody. But I'd love to be surprised and they just roll it out to everybody for Thanksgiving. That would be pretty incredible.
Yeah, I agree. I really don't see it. I mean, and honestly, I'm just excited to see you or some of the others and, put your videos, do some live drives, maybe show us what it's like, just so we know what it is, because really we don't have any information, and to see how great it is. So that would be super exciting. And I don't know. I think it's going to be great. It'll probably come fast. And I don't know. Hopefully, we get it. At least to the early access group this week.
Yeah, I hope so. Teslar?
Hey Omar, hey everybody. Thank you for having me. I just wanted to comment on how mind-blowing the latest version of FSD has gotten, and specifically that human touch. For example, like merging onto the expressway, or or the two examples was merging on expressway or changing lane on the expressway. It had a slight robotic feel to it before this latest version, but now getting onto an expressway that's busy and there's just a flow of traffic in that next left lane, the way it accelerates and it asserts itself into in between cars was just mind-blowing to experience. And then moving like maybe two, I moved 2 lanes, it moved 2 lanes once, and it did it and like how I would do it, where I would almost not pause in between the 2 lane changes. Those are just two like mind blowing things, and so I'm thinking how much better 13 is going to be. And then I wanted to ask everybody else
Yeah,
that's
it's kind of
driving.
hard for me to imagine like what could be 5 times better than the version that's already on my car.
Yeah, that part is just it's mind boggling. It's exciting. It's gonna be really exciting to experience. But one issue or two issues I've had on the latest one was the way it slows down kind of hard behind cars on the expressway. It doesn't give the distance. It just gets up closer to the vehicle and then stops a little harder. And then particular stop signs too. It just rushes up to the stop sign and it really breaks and it kind of jerks you in your seat. I was wondering if anybody had the same experience.
Um, I haven't seen that on my Model 3, but on my Cybertruck, in particular the first FSD Cybertruck build, it would do this thing where it would like stop at the last minute, and it was honestly kind of funny watching the car in front of you panic a little bit, like they thought they were going to get hit. It would never hit them, and then of course the viewing angle of the Cybertruck, you can't really see the car, so it kind of looks like you're on top of them. So I would have that issue a lot where it would kind of break late, but in the latest Cybertruck FSD build, they seem to have fixed that. But yeah, they're making the model 3 times larger. They're adding the hardware 4 cameras. Those higher resolution cameras should allow it to see things from much further away. It should allow for more accurate distance measurements. And I'm guessing it'll just be smoother in general, more natural. but we'll have to see once it arrives.
Yeah. One more thing that I noticed, that if you have a speeding car behind you on the expressway, it does move over. That was a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, the improved highway behavior is really great. When someone's following closely behind you, it lets them pass. It can weave in between traffic. It can go around slow cars, even going on the right when necessary if it's a two-lane highway. So, I mean, it's just such a game changer for road trips, I think. And the really interesting thing about FSD is, it's just gotten so good, but it's hard to convince the user to start trusting it and using it. Once they do, they often get hooked. But
Yeah.
I think going to the highway is really significant because everyone uses highway autopilot. So if you tell your friend who uses basic autopilot, hey, they've got this new version, it's got no nag, and I mean, it's just a day and night difference. The old autopilot, basic autopilot, is so robotic compared to this new end to end system. I think it's going to be hard not to subscribe for $99 a month with that level of improvement. And they're going to find that when it's time to get out of the highway, it doesn't just end at the end of the on ramp like navigate on autopilot. It'll actually just continue and take them all the way to their destination.
Yeah.
So, unsupervised is one thing, but if we can just get everybody to start using supervised FSD, the profitability of the North American auto business could double. And I mean, obviously, instead of having to sell cars, you've just got this cash flow coming in from subscribers on a regular basis. If the churn is low, I'd also like to see them offer a $9.99 a year annual subscription, just like they offer a $99 premium connectivity. Because I think churn is a big issue for them. You see people online saying, I'm canceling for all kinds of reasons. They're like, hey, I didn't get the new update fast enough. I'm canceling, you know? Or, oh, they added hands-free trunk. I really want to try that. Let me cancel and maybe I'll get that feature faster or something. So longer commitment periods I think could be good. If they can just tell that story to Wall Street, hey, FSD users doubled. We are seeing a record number of subscriptions. Then things start to get really interesting.
Yeah. I believe that they strategically started giving out those trials, because once they did, that's when I noticed I have a lot of zero intervention drives. And so, now that they're giving people the opportunity to really show it to their friends and family when it's at its best, and not having to disengage or anything, was really smart.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions or comments on FSD 13 or anything else we discussed today before we close out?
Omar, I was hoping I could ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm driving the FSD on the Cybertruck, and one thing that I hadn't heard your discussion tonight about was the comfortability of it just in general. You can't really measure it, right? Because there's no actual data points. It's just how you feel while you're driving it. And I can really experience that when I have somebody else in my car who's never experienced it. I'm like, hey, let me show you this. And it does something weird, and they freak out, right? So on the Cybertruck, I'm wondering, and I'm hoping the new update will eventually get to the point where it's not coming in too hot behind cars, which it currently does too much of. It's not coming in too hot behind the stop sign and scaring everybody. But what are your thoughts on just feeling comfortable? I think we all that are listening right now probably feel pretty